Okay. Okay.
Yes.
I'll call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. My name is Richard Stewart. I'm the Mayor of Coquitlam, and I'll be chairing the public hearing as well as the council meeting that will follow just after the public hearing. Now, I'm advised, and this there was a sign put up in Smiling Creek several weeks ago. It wasn't attributed to anybody. We've posted repeatedly that that is actually not on tonight's agenda. There may be some people in the room, though, that are here for related to the school site in Smiling Creek. That is not on tonight's agenda. So if you wait about 2 minutes, I'll be talking about someone else, and you can sneak out quietly as though you weren't here. But that's not on tonight's agenda. We're actually going through another round of public consultation related to that site. Okay. On behalf of City Council, I'd like to welcome you all here this evening. This is a public hearing into the bylaws that will be introduced to you in a moment by the City Clerk. Council for the City of Coquitlam has given first reading to these bylaws and has directed that we hear from the public on all of them. So how it will work is this. Staff from the City's Planning and Development Department will first present a summary of the proposed bylaw, one at a time. On each one of those bylaws, the floor will then be open to anyone in the audience who has views that they want to share on the proposed bylaw. Those that have pre-registered will be given the first opportunity to speak. Of course, we're open to anyone that's in the room, so after that, we'll open the floor to anyone else that wishes to offer their opinion. I stress to all of you that this is a public hearing. It's an opportunity for anyone who has a view on the proposed bylaws to make that view known to Council. Council members are here with an open mind and are here actually specifically to hear your input about these proposed bylaws. No one has prejudged the outcome of these applications, but there are some rules that Council has asked me to enforce. And first of all, it's not a question and answer period. It's not an opportunity to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with either Council members or with staff or with someone in the audience who has a different point of view. Everyone's going to have varying points of view, and we want to hear them all. So we ask that everybody please restrict your comments to the proposed bylaw that's on the floor at that moment, and to be as brief and concise as possible. We are asking speakers to respect a 5-minute time limit in order that everyone who wishes to speak on that bylaw is able to do so. Speakers, you're allowed to speak more than once. If you've got some more good stuff that you haven't said yet, you can get up to the back of the line and you'll be heard a second time. We ask that the audience be respectful of each speaker and allow that speaker to make his or her point without interruption. And the way we find this works best is you don't clap, you don't boo, we don't cheer. Please, no heckling, nothing. There's nothing from the audience. And then everyone will feel comfortable as you can, standing at a microphone in front of a room full of people. But we want everyone to feel comfortable, so please respect that for each speaker that comes before us, even if you vehemently disagree with them, in which case you should get to the back of the line and make sure your point of view gets heard respectfully as well. So as chair of the meeting, I reserve the right to conclude any presentation that doesn't relate to the bylaw, that becomes abusive in any way, or becomes repetitive of views that the speaker has already made known to council members. Please note as well that we can receive information on a bylaw until I declare the final reading. Essentially, I offer 3 times, are there any more speakers to this item, after which the item is closed and council can receive no further information on that bylaw until we dispose of it, either give it 3rd and 4th reading or reject it. So if you have something that you want to be part of the permanent record, some written notes or some photos or something, you have to hand them in to the clerk's office, the clerk's desk right here, and Linda will take them. Prior to that 3rd and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? After which we can't receive anything until we're finished with it. Please also note, Council, oops, I already said that. Immediately following adjournment of the public hearing tonight, that's probably 20 minutes, 25 minutes from now. Okay. We're going to have a regular council meeting in order to hear and make decisions on a whole number of things that are in the council agenda, as well as the items from tonight's public hearing. If, however, any council member needs more information or there's a request for a delay related to that, we can actually put off the decision of one of them to the next council meeting, which is not until September. But generally speaking, we hear all, we'll have all 4 of those votes in the same night as the public hearing. So I now call on Mr. Gilbert to introduce the bylaws on tonight's agenda and the Planning and Development staff to make a presentation on the first item.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item is bylaw number 4500. It pertains to 709, 713, and 715 Breslay Street. The intent of bylaw number 4500 is to amend City of Coquitlam zoning bylaw number 3000 to rezone the properties at 709, 713, and 715 Breslay Street from RT1 two-family residential to RM3 multi-story medium-density apartment residential. If approved, this application would facilitate the development of a 7-story, 77-unit apartment building.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This site is located on the east side of Breslay, north of Smith Avenue. The site, as well as the immediate, helps if I turn that on. The site, as well as in the immediate area to the north, south, west, and east, is designated medium-density apartment residential under the city's official community plan. Zoning on the site and to the north, south, and east is RT1 two-family residential. Zoning to the west is RM3 multi-story medium-density apartment residential. The site currently includes, which includes 3 lots, contains 1 single-family resident on each of the lots. The applicant is requesting rezoning to RM3 multi-story medium-density apartment residential in conformance with the official community plan designation to construct a 7-story apartment building, which, as currently proposed, meets all the provisions of the RM3 zone. As a note, the RM3 has a permitted maximum building height of 8 stories. It has been that a maximum permitted height since 1973. The recent amendments to the zone adopted in March of 2012 increased the density with a corresponding reduction in maximum lot coverage for each additional step in building stories. The purpose of these amendments, which was to better enable the achievement of these maximum building heights, which have been envisioned for this zone since the early 1970s. Staff are recommending second and third readings to rezoning bylaw number 4500. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a list of speakers that have registered, and we'll begin with the principal of the applicant, Mr. John Ritchie, who's with Springbank Development Breslay Corp. And they're at 330, 319 West Pender Street in Vancouver. Mr. Ritchie, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back, rather.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I just wanted to point out that over the last couple of years, we've been working very closely with the Planning Department to come up with a planned project for this site. We originally came in and were discussing a 4-story frame apartment building, very similar to what's been built along Como Lake Road and what's on Smith Road, and I think what a lot of people were actually expecting to be built in this neighborhood. But as we were getting into the process, we started a dialogue with planning about how we could come up with a different form of housing for this neighborhood. During the course of our, between the time we first made an application and now the council has approved a transit-oriented development strategy. And working with that document and the planning department, we ultimately came up with this building. And I just want to, I'd like to, briefly touch on how I feel that we meet the objectives of this document, because it was part of the guiding document that led us to where we are today. That document is a vision for how development is going to occur along the Evergreen line, and there were some stated goals in there, and I'm going to read them if I may. One of them is to increase housing choices in close proximity to transit. One was development of housing that encouraged healthier lifestyles through increased transit use, cycling, and walking. One was development that reduced the reliance on the automobile to get around. And the final one I'd like to comment on is it envisioned a higher intensity mix of land uses. And so I feel that the project that we've got envisioned and that's before you now meets those goals. In terms of increased housing choices in the neighborhood, while I think that the neighborhood has some really good housing choices, if you went there today, you could buy. There's duplexes. There's 3-story townhouses, there's stacked townhouses, there's 4-story frame apartment buildings, and this just adds to the variety that's available to the buyers. This building is envisioned as a high-quality, concrete boutique building. It's targeting more end users than investors. While if you look at the floor plans, you'll see that there's a lot of 600 square foot 1-bedrooms and 800 square foot 2-bedrooms. We've structurally designed the building so that we can combine suites, and we're just fine-tuning our plans right now, where we've got 2 600 square foot suites that can easily be turned into a 1,200 square foot 2-bedroom and den. We've got a 600 and an 800 square foot suite that can easily become a 1,400 square foot 3-bedroom home. And we envision providing housing for people who have lived in this neighborhood for a long time and who don't want to leave the neighborhood but don't want to move into that 800 square foot 2-bedroom condo, because that's really not for them. And so while our plans are showing that, we are actively going to be marketing to people who are looking for something high quality with a high degree of flexibility. In terms of housing that encourages healthy lifestyles and reduces the reliance on automobiles, the primary driver of that here is our location. If you look at the TDS map, there's 2 circles, concentric circles, running out from the Evergreen Line station. Can we turn this on? This document reader? It'll be on in a second. And this site is within the core area of the TDS. And I think that line was drawn there because the little black smudge there is our site. That line was drawn because it's generally considered that if you're within 400 meters, that you're more likely to walk to the Evergreen Line. But it's more than the Evergreen Line. It's the new Safeway that's going in. It's the, hopefully, community center that's going in shortly. This is a very pedestrian-oriented neighborhood. Our buyers will walk down Langside Avenue through a cul-de-sac across a park to their services. And so that's, just by virtue of its location, it meets that goal. The other way that it meets the goal is that we're providing the first part of a pedestrian walkway that will link Langside Avenue to Seton Avenue, and I think that this is a very important part of the planning strategy to encourage people to be able to walk from Robinson to the SkyTrain, the Coquitlam town center, if you will, without having to walk on a busy street. And so this will absolutely encourage the walkability, and will encourage people to walk and cycle. And so, you know, in those ways, I believe that, and in terms of a higher intensity land mix, I think that we're heading in the right direction with the densities. We're maxing out our densities, obviously, and but I think that's what Council has signaled that they really want for this neighborhood. I had a whole lot more stuff here, but I read the planning's answers to your questions. I had put comments together regarding your questions from the first reading, but I think the planning did a really good job of answering those, so I'm going to skip that. The one comment that wasn't addressed was one that I believe Councillor Reid made about about housing values in the neighborhood and how this is going to impact on housing values in the neighborhood. And I really believe that this building is going to take the level of quality in the neighborhood up a notch, and I think it's going to actually improve the neighborhood. The streetscape and the architect, Keith Hempel is going to go over the actual building in a moment, but it's a high quality boutique building, and I really feel that it is going to generate a lot of positive attributes for this neighborhood. And then there was one other comment that I had to make, and that is that. As you probably know, we built the project across the street, and it's a stacked townhome project. And so over the last 2 years, our marketing people have had an opportunity to talk to, I don't think I'd be exaggerating if I said thousands of people who are, coming to look for homes. And they have strongly recommended this type of housing. They feel that there's real demand. They feel that people who live in the neighborhood and who might be taking advantage of perhaps increased values as densities are increasing around them, and they want to. Their children have grown up and moved out, and they want a high-end place to live. That there's a market for this, and there's also a market for young people who want a Yaletown-style lifestyle, but maybe can't afford Yaletown, and that's what we're hoping to provide. So that was our thought process in designing this building, and thank you very much for your time.
Mr. Ritchie, there may be questions here for you, but just hold on a moment. We'll start with Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Pardon my voice, it's a little funny tonight. The height of the building across the street and the height compared to yours.
In terms of the actual building height?
Yeah, as built.
I don't have that answer.
Pardon?
I do not have that answer. It's at the street level. It's the equivalent of a 4-story building. It's the equivalent of a 4-story building at the pitch of the roof.
Well, I know there's 4 stories across the street. Perhaps staff will have that answer. So you've moved the 7th floor in, 85%, right? Coverage at the top.
Yes.
And nothing on the 6th or 5th. Like we're just
No,
doing,
the
the
6th and 7th. The 6th and 7th floors have come in. Are 85% of the 5th floor.
Yeah. So that's the only inward movement.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I needed.
Okay, and one, Councillor Zerillo.
Yeah, thank you very much. I actually opened up a little bit what my question was, and I wanted to ask a little bit about the profile of the person that would move into this this type of housing. And as I walked around the site, I noticed that there was quite a few stairs and quite a few mobility issue in the 4-level thing. So I'm looking at this from the idea of who do you think is going to be in there? I mean, you alluded to it, but is there more research, or can you give us any sort of? Well,
unfortunately, marketing is not an exact science. But if you're referring to the stairs in the 4-story building that we built across the street, lots of stairs, absolutely, it's got a different buyer profile. That was those homes were 11 to 1,200 square foot, 2- and 3-bedroom townhomes. They were catering to young families, and they were a entry-level form of housing. And when somebody and really they were not designed for people with mobility issues. Absolutely not. This building is a completely different profile. This is ramps to the front door if need be. There's elevators. It's corridors. It's there's no stairs within the homes. There's no steps to negotiate. Our buyer profile is really a local Coquitlam resident who is selling a home, been in their home for 30 to 40 years, and looking for something, looking to downsize into a high quality home with, many of these people have been living with their plastic laminate countertops and their, 40-year-old wood cabinets, and they look at design magazines, and now they finally get to have it, and that's what we're hoping to provide for them.
So thank you very much, because that was one of the things when I first looked at it, was I was looking for the ramp at the front of the building. I didn't see it on the drawing, so thank you for confirming that it exists. And this is one thing, I mean, I know I've been door knocking quite a bit in the South Coquitlam, and I know a few people that are in that, they've lived in the south slope of Coquitlam for 30, 40, 50 years, and they've actually are going into the tower at the corner of Austin and Blue Mountain. So I understand that it could be a good solution for them. And aging in place is one of the things that's on the top of my sheet here. So is there the opportunity to make, or are these units accessible to people with mobility issues? Do they need to be modified in that way, or will you have a percentage of them that will already fulfill that requirement?
They are not designed that way at the moment. We are going through our, this is our development permit application. We are, as we're going through and we're marketing, we intend to be making some minor changes to the suites as we go along, and that could certainly be incorporated in some of the suites.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
And Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I understand this planned development would have 77 units at 7 stories. How many units would you expect to get if this were a 4-story building similar to the ones in the neighborhood?
I would
on that same footprint.
On the same footprint. Well,
yeah.
If it was a 4-story, it would be on a different footprint, because under 4-story you can get you can go to 55% site coverage, and with ours we can only go to 40% site coverage. So, for example, a project called Easton, which is Kitty Corner, it's on Smith and.
So let me rephrase that then. On the same number of lots, that same general lots.
They have 71 or 72. But that was developed prior to the RM3 text amendment going through.
Right.
I believe that if you look at the squares are the sites that will become available sometime in the next 20 years. Some of those have relatively new duplexes on them, and they're not going anywhere for a while. But eventually, those 9 lots that are identified, really 10, because Lot 5 is going to be 2 lots, would all be similar buildings to this. Or if they were built in a wood frame, say 5-story configuration, they would have at least as many suites per square foot. Yeah. And
this is going to be concrete. Your proposal is for 7-story concrete.
Yes, it is.
And if it were on that same number of lots, the townhouse type thing, or a 4-story, it'd be wood frame. Would one expect a higher asking price for the concrete condo units, as opposed to if it was the units would be built on a smaller, lower building and a wood frame? Is that what's the best value for a buyer there? I know you're going for a different market and everything, but I'm just interested in that.
Yes, concrete commands a premium. It commands a premium because it costs more. It's about dollar for dollar for every. Yeah, this isn't real estate economics, but I figure that for every dollar I spend, I get my dollar back by going to concrete.
Right, so it costs more, so you'll be asking more, so you can get your dollar back.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Ritchie, when we met the other day, you were going to do some shadow studies. You emailed us a first draft, and I've seen one of my colleagues has a further version, and I'm wondering whether you have them for all of us. And even better if you could show them to the people in the room.
Yes, Councillor Nicholson, my architect was going to show these, but since you asked for them and I happen to have them in my hand, I will.
Oh, well, perhaps your architect will explain them.
This came about because we met one of my neighbors that she was standing on her patio, and she was very concerned about the shadows that the buildings would cast on her deck, and she bought a ground floor suite in the building next to ours, and she's got a lovely suite, and the sun was shining on it that day, and the flowers were blooming, and it looked very nice, and I felt very bad for her if we were in fact going to cast shadows on her. And I'm very happy that when I went back and asked the architect to do a shadow study, that it came out. This is the June 21st. This is the summer solstice, the absolute worst case scenario that could possibly happen for Annie. And Annie's deck is about where the X is on the, it's hard to see, I just put a little X on the plan, but, and you can see where the shadows are, I'll try to, the worst case scenario would be the 8 a.m. Shadow, and I'm just going to point to which one that is on here because it's very hard to read.
Okay, so Annie's not north, east, or west of your project.
Annie is south. Southwest of us, just barely.
So there's probably a 5 a.m. that she could see some shadow.
Well, we normally do 10, 12, and 2, and I had him do 8 because I thought, so I can't see the sun the shadow hitting Annie's deck anyway.
He did 2.
I'll see. Okay, you done?
Thank you.
I was immensely confused by one of your drawings in one of these packages at some point, and I can't find it now, so I may call you back.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also on behalf of the applicant is architect Keith Hempel. Brosich Hempel at Unit 10, 120 Powell Street in Vancouver. Now, for anyone who's not registered, that's what you'll be expected to do. Give your name and address for the record. Please.
Yes, thank you. Keith Hempel, Rossage.
Mr. Hempel.
architects, Mayor and Council. So I'll just attempt to briefly walk you through the building itself. I think John has covered most of the development issues in particular, and Erica has also given you some background as well. So when this comes up, I'll... is it ready? Oh, there's the mouse. Excellent. I just need an image, and I'll be happy with that. Can it go to the beginning? I'm not sure how I ended up in the middle. Okay, here we go. Okay, so just something that I'd like to just touch on is the context of the project. As of course, we're very sensitive to context generally, but something to just point out in here is the nature of the neighborhood. It's a dynamic neighborhood. It's changing a lot, and there are a number of things going on. Our site, of course, is in the red box. There's considerable amount of development happening directly to the west, and it's mostly happened. This picture is a little bit out of date. What's interesting, though, is that you can see the parking lot here, Coquitlam Plaza, and of course the transit station is coming in just at the other end of that. So I think this helps to give us a sense of how close we really are to the transit, which I think is terrific that has finally gone ahead. In addition to the sort of transit issues, there are also a number of areas I know for sure, because I've worked on some of this, that there are a couple of buildings just south of Vanessa Crescent here, or Court here, that will end up being 5-story buildings. There are a number of buildings just in very close proximity which have been approved or developed, and I'm sure you're quite aware of a number of those additional ones. What it does, though, is it gives us a context which is radically different than what you might be used to, because it is so dynamic and it's changing. So a lot of what we think about is not just what's going on now, it's what's going to be going on in the future as this the whole transit-oriented development precinct develops. So let's just move in a little bit here. You can see superimposed on the plan here the actual site plan. I think it may be more useful to actually move up another notch. There we go. So I can just explain kind of how the site plan is laid out. It was a little challenging in that it's not a normal rectangular shaped site. You can see there's an angle on both the lane and the street side. And because the site, which I'll show you later in section and elevations, has a substantial change in slope. There's a big grade change between the lane side, which is almost a full story higher than the front of the street, at the street. So we had some interesting things to work through with that. One of which was how to provide parking access. So very, very early on, we had a discussion with engineering and planning about how to arrange the access. That's shown here on the very far right-hand side of the picture. There's a parking entrance there. And as we look at the renderings and a little later, you can see we've made quite a strong effort to mitigate the image of that, or the impact of that, through architectural treatment. So entrance to the underground parking is here in the center of the site, this sort of yellow colored symbol for the patio, and here's the main entrance to the building. And just that curved line, by the way, Councillor Cirillo, that is the ramp that would allow for accessible access to the front door. But because of the grade change, we set the elevation of the lobby such that you do actually, approaching the doors straight in, you would go up 4 risers, I believe, and stairs toward that, and then the ramp makes up the difference here. Something interesting, though, is that we've opened the building up right through so that when someone is approaching the building, you can see all the way through to the common outdoor courtyard on the other side of the building, which is also designated here with a yellow color. And adjacent to that, we have an amenity room, a common use for the residents in the building at that point. As you move down Breslay Street toward the north end of the site here, one thing that's very important is evident again with the yellow-colored pavement, is that is half of a future public walkway, a public right-of-way, which will connect Breslay Street through to the neighborhood by pedestrian access to the east of the site. So because this site has gone ahead of the other, and eventually when the one to the north of us develops, the other half of that walkway system will be implemented. And what we've proposed right now, I would consider to be an interim condition, so that it works. It works. I mean, you've got the pathway, and you've got the pavement, you've got the access through there. But it does, in the future, it will expand to twice its size and be much more of a public area. So to that end, we have at the very the west end of it, the Breslay side, we have treated that more almost as a common public plaza-like area as an invitation for that access to work. And with that in mind, that would become in the future more of a public access. The residential units have effectively a kind of front door aspect to that, so that there's a little bit more of a septic solution there with eyes on the street kind of thing for that pathway. When you get around to the other side on the lane, again, this is higher, so we have developed pedestrian access in through the back. Through this common area here, which is a landscape, and I have a landscape plan I'll come back to in just a minute and give you a bit more information there, but it opens to outdoor space and creates quite a substantial courtyard here. But while we're on this picture, because it's easier to illustrate, you can see the footprint of the building, which is all light yellow. We made a very concerted effort to make the building as narrow as possible, and in order to create as big a setback from the principal walls of the building to the property line. And that again relates to the massing and the height, and I'll come to it again with a different view, but here it's easy to see. If you look, there's a heavy dashed line back here, which is set back from the property line, and our walls project forward a little bit at the ends with the idea to create a courtyard, but the majority of the wall here is set back substantially beyond the minimum. In other words, almost 3 times as much as would normally be required to create that amount of open space. Likewise, we have a 4-meter setback on the west side of the property here. The heavy dashed red line is the minimum required setback, but you can see again there's a substantial improvement to that. Now that's part of a function of the text amendment too, in that we have a 2.4 FSR, which means that we need to be able to get the building footprint down to only 40% coverage, which inherently improves the amount of open space around these buildings, and I think directly addresses, I think, if I'm not wrong, Erica or Raul might be able to correct me if that it wasn't a principle of the text amendment was to encourage a variety of development. I think what was happening is that developers were coming in with very consistent plans so that you were getting quite a homogeneous neighborhood. And I think one of the advantages of this approach to going to concrete and going to the higher number of stories is that you will get a big improvement in the variety of housing, the variety of buildings, and the variety in the character of the neighborhood. So this is just a floor plan. Again, I think actually it was mostly intended to illustrate sort of how we have the larger setbacks, improving the amount of open space, greater setbacks here. And then when we look at that in 3 dimensions, you can see that I'll look at it from the side. You can see that's important. So just generally in terms of the massing, we've broken the building into sort of 3 components. On the right side of the image here, we have a character of a building which is a little bit different than the left side of it, and we've divided that with a portion of the building which has a sort of completely separate character over the principal entrance, which is just here with a canopy. Again, to kind of break up the massing itself and provide a greater level of articulation. In a straight-on elevation, it's not as easy to see as when you see that in perspective, but let's look at the side views of the buildings. This is where I think, Councillor Reid, you'd be able to see the amount of setback. Now, one of the things is that we have larger multifamily buildings to the west of us, and we have smaller, currently, more single-family homes to the east. And so one of the things that we've tried to do is to respect that relationship by putting the bulk of our setback toward the eastern side. So up here on the upper right, you can see that there's a substantial bite out of the upper 2 floors. There's only a portion on the ends of the building that don't do that. That's where the entry is, but the center of the building sets back on both sides. And again, you can see here the property line. You can see the minimums, the property line here, the setback, and then this is the closest we get. But that line back here is where the majority of the building sits when we looked at that in plan. Of course, this is the same on the other side. But what this is illustrating is how much of a significant difference there is in slope between the Breslay Street side on the west and going up, as I said, almost a full story to the lane on the east. Now that is generally following the topography of the neighborhood. It keeps going higher as we go east, and so those buildings are, elevation-wise, substantially higher than they would be if we were on the west side of Breslay. Again, just a quick section cutting through where we have the majority of the walls is right at this line with the windows on both sides of the building. And again, I'm sort of attempting to illustrate the relationship of an open space to the lane side, and here again on the Breslay side. and you can see that we've managed to put all of the parking underground, which, by the way, we're not looking for any relaxation whatsoever in terms of the required amount of parking. It's all been provided according to bylaw. So here's an illustration, I think, to just sort of help understand that relationship. If we were to do a standard, I shouldn't say standard, but to do a 5-story wood frame building in this area and put a conventional roof on it, that would be this dashed line with the pink overlay on it that would give you a mass roughly equal to that. And the coverage would change quite a bit. You would see that there's more of the ground covered by a building, and we would be at the setback line, which is still evident there with the red writing. And then if you look again, partly because of the topography is going up, a 3-story building here with a pitched roof would bring that roughly to the same height, the same elevation here, as the 4-story portion of this proposal. So the idea is then to kind of step that down in a transition that's commensurate with the neighbors. And that's partly a function of distance, and it's partly a function of height. So if we have a building or a wall that's closer, it's giving you basically the same kind of overlook and overshadowing relationship as one that's higher but further away. And that's the essence of why we've set the building back so far in those portions. There's an easier version of the shadow diagram to read. I think when it was on the overhead, it wasn't quite so clear. I think this may be a little easier to see. As John said, though, the very early morning, which normally speaking we wouldn't really consider, the typical kind of analysis times would be from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on the spring and fall equinox. But because we have concerns about the shadow, we've illustrated what would happen in here and in longer times of day. And there you can see where I didn't have an X on here, but I'm sure that was what John was alluding to, is that the shadows even at this time would not impact that particular neighbor. What is very good to see, though, to note, is that at the 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock limits, even with the 7-story building, the shadows actually just barely make it to the other side of the pavement on the street and not onto the adjacent properties. And so you can see as the sun comes around here to 2 p.m., the same is also true at the lane, which is I think quite important. With respect to the landscape, there's a very strong palette of landscaping. I'm not the landscape architect, but we have worked very closely with them to develop an interesting and seasonal kind of treatment to the landscape. But what is important is that the homes that are on the ground floor do actually have, and you can see the little sidewalk leading up to patios, a kind of presence on the street as opposed to simply the front door of the building, and that continues around the side against the future public walkway here. I shouldn't say future, this will be half built with this project. And again, a substantial amount of open space all the way from the edge of the yellow wall here through to a very large outdoor courtyard. We do have actually one sort of service function in the lane, and that is that we've managed to arrange it so that the loading bay is at the back here, and then we've provided access through to the lobby through the rear of the building rather than coming all the way around to the other side. And hopefully we'll be able to encourage that space to be used. Now, I'd like to give you a little bit of an idea what it looks like there. In fact, in this rendering, you can see the ramp coming up on the sidewalk up to the door from this side, and the main stair coming up here. There is a bit of a canopy porte cochere quality entrance in here. The colors are not exactly right on this rendering. There were some issues, I think, with the renderer. But you can see the change in character on the south end of the building through this dividing sort of element in the center, and then changing that to a more of a horizontal expression on the north side of the building. And the materials in here, we would consider these to be high quality. There's a considerable amount of stone cladding and window wall treatment, glass balcony railings, and a high quality window wall system for the balance of the building. One final image here just to give you an idea what the building would look like in the whole rendering. And again, a substantial amount of landscape treatment at the ground plane, main entrance in here. And just one more sort of reference back to the articulation of the building and how the building is sort of terracing and stepping again to sort of influence the massing on that. So with that, I hope I give you a bit of an overview of what the architecture is and how it works. And so I'm finished with that. Thank you.
And I have no questions here for you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Our next speaker is Michelle Bush, 721 Breslay. Michelle. And after Michelle is Daniel Ha. Michelle.
I'd like to thank you all for giving us this opportunity to talk about the rezoning in the neighborhood. I've been in that neighborhood now for about 13 years. I have an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I can understand the importance of all the planning and the forethought that's gone into the development of this area. However, as a resident living in there, the reality is not quite what the pictures are that we are being shown here. For one thing, you're talking about improving access to the outdoors and encouraging people to go outside and get exercise and fitness and so on by using the SkyTrain. That's not happened so far. We are surrounded by developments, none of which have enough parking, and the streets are clogged. It used to be two-way traffic with some parking spots on the street available. Now there's so many people parking on the streets that it's one-way, and you have to be very careful when you're pulling in and out of traffic because the traffic there has exponentially increased. With 2 young children who I am encouraging to play outside and play hockey in the driveway and play basketball in the driveway, ride their bikes, that's been really impacted. It's not safe to have the children ride their bikes down to the little park area anymore. It's not really safe for them to be on the street playing hockey, even though they're in our driveway. If the ball rolls, there's people coming in and out of Langside and off of Smith at exorbitant speeds that were not there before. So there are 3 main concerns that I wanted to address. One of them, the main one, is really that nothing's been done in that area to support new infrastructure requirements. Langside wasn't widened, Breslay wasn't widened, there's not enough room for parking, there's not enough room for the traffic to get in and out for all these new people who have moved into the area. That 77-unit structure replaced 3 homes, so maybe tops 18 people lived in there. Now you're going to have 100 to 150 people in that same geographic space, and you've not allowed anything in the infrastructure to support them. You're supposing that the majority of them are going to ride the SkyTrain. So far, that's not true in the developments that live there in reality, I'm sorry to say. There's not even enough room right now for a fire truck to make it down Langside if something should happen. So that is a concern in the neighborhood. Once the Evergreen line was approved, the developers and city planners created a plan for our neighborhood to rezone and rebuild, and there was a lot of forethought put into it. I understand all the planning and all the things that have gone into this. But if you're the last of 5 homes stuck on a block and you have these huge towers surrounding you on all sides, you can understand how uncomfortable that is and how that changes the whole look and feel of a neighborhood. And it's completely out of my control because I have neighbors on either side that aren't willing to deal with the developers or want exorbitant amount from the developers. So there's a row of 5 of us who are stuck there now forever because of a bad neighbor that owns maybe 2 or 3 of the properties out of the 5. So really, unless the developer, if you're going to rezone an area for this higher density housing, the developer should have to develop an entire neighborhood and not leave 5 people stuck. It might sound like 5 homes in a row looks fine, but amongst all of that, it looks ridiculous. And if the homes aren't kept up properly, it's going to change it for Springbank as well. Because I, for one, wouldn't buy a nice apartment with some shoddy-looking homes left stuck in the middle of a neighborhood that way. As the land is cleared and prepped for construction, and Springbank has hired the architectural firm to create working drawings for the projects, a lot of money has already gone into this project, with them fully expecting you to say yes to this rezoning application. And I'm hoping that you will consider the actual people who are living in this neighborhood, not just the pictures and the plans that are in place for them, and rethink it. That homogeneous neighborhood that they're talking about, the first project that Springbank has done across the street from us on Breslay, is actually lovely. It adds to the residential feel of it. The grounds are beautiful. The homes they built there are beautiful. It's not a huge tower that overtakes everything. I'm probably going to be stuck at 721 Breslay for quite some time because my property value has diminished, regardless of what's been said here today. And I'm stuck between those neighbors who don't want to talk to the developer, which would be fine if they build developments like the one across the street from us. But if we're surrounded by towers that way, it's not safe for my children. It's not a great area to live in anymore. And I really don't believe that one little pathway leading down to a park is going to change it all that much. Thank you very much for your consideration. Sorry, are there any questions?
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hodge.
A question to staff. On the roads, Langside, is that full width? I seem to recall when I went down there was parking on both sides, but concern about widths there. I know it's sort of the main walkway down to the park, but I'm just wondering if that's one that we're building to normal standards, and again, my concern for the fire truck.
Through you, Your Worship. In terms of Breslay, the street that the development fronts on, it's intended to be a 10.5 meter wide roadway with 1.8 meter sidewalks on both sides and boulevards. So it will be accommodating that parking and two-way traffic on Breslay, the development frontage. In terms of Langside, I don't have that in front of me, and I don't know whether Ms. Tiffany or Mr. McIntyre can help me with the actual the status of the improvements on Langside. The one thing to be aware of course, as in a redeveloping area, the road improvements do take place over time, and it is something that occurs through, and there's a number of transition that is gone through in a neighborhood, and quite often you end up with the contractors in the area building the new buildings and so on, and adding to the parking congestion in the area, and those road improvements aren't done. So it is something that is phased in over time as developments proceed.
So is the, in front of this development, is the road being widened, pulled back? Are we going to end up with just sort of a section that's wider, and that eventually through development we'll end up with a wider road than we have now?
That's correct, Your Worship. On this side of the road is being widened, and as was already spoke of across the street, the lion's share of that is also being widened or widened due to the other development that is proceeding across the street. So this developer is responsible for frontage improvements on the Breslay Street and side of the street, as well as on the laneway on the other side of the development.
To be clear, though, he's responsible for those only related to those three properties.
That's correct, Your Worship. On their frontage is what they're being held responsible for.
Okay, thank you.
And my recollection of Langside was that they stored a lot of construction materials on the side of the road during construction, so I think there's room for parking. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay. And I've got Daniel Ha at 621 Langside, followed by Kathy Bell.
If you don't mind, I'm just going to read off a piece of paper, just keep my thoughts in order here.
Perfectly.
There's a lot of things going on, I guess.
Anything you like.
Okay. So when my family and I moved to Langside over 4 years ago, we were really excited about the upcoming changes to the area. I knew there was going to be a lot of new development, but this proposed 7-story building on Breslay is not what we expected, nor is it something that we want. So I'm going to basically outline 3 reasons why I really don't want to see this building there on Breslay. The first reason is the size. This building is way too large for the area. This building does not conform to the character. This building does not conform to the character of the area. If you look around, you'll see a lot of single-family homes and, multi-family homes and low-rises and townhomes. That's the one that I live in. But nowhere east of the park do you actually see a tower. And I'm calling it a tower because from the park, because of the slope, if you look up Langside, you're going to see this 7-story building that's probably going to look larger than 7 stories from there. The second reason that I really don't want to see this happen here is because of the traffic and parking. I've heard from council members many times about this already, and other people have spoken to this. If this building becomes a reality, 77 units will definitely worsen the traffic and parking problems for the local people that live there now. I personally witnessed many cases of dangerous driving on Breslay and Langside, and adding a big building to Breslay is going to worsen the problem, not make it better. Traffic and parking is a massive problem where I live right now. Not at all times of the day, so if you visited today, there'll be lots of open parking in the middle of the day because people are at work. But once people start to come home, it becomes a nightmare. So being close to transit, where this building will be, will likely reduce mileage, in cars, and that's what we're kind of expecting with this transit-oriented, village that we're building here. But the actual number of cars, I think, will either stay the same or actually grow because, there are more people buying cars. People still want cars because they want choice. They don't just want to shop at Safeway. They may want to go somewhere else. So they may take transit to work, and that's fine. But when they come home, they're still going to have a car, and they need a place to put that car. Right now, that place is the street, and there are a lot of units coming in, and I don't think there's going to be enough parking for everyone. And that creates a lot of problems for the residents right now. Okay. The third reason is really the overall design of the building. I mean, it's a nice-looking building. It doesn't fit into the actual neighborhood. But the main problem I have is twofold. One is where the parking exit is going to be on Breslay. I think it's actually a pretty dangerous spot to put it there, okay, because a lot of people are going to be trying to make left-hand turns onto Breslay in order to get to Smith. And, we're talking 77 units. I don't know how many cars that translates into, but in the morning it's going to be a very busy place, and there are kids walking to school along Breslay and eventually up Smith, and I have 2 of those kids that will be going to school in the next few years. So I'm very concerned about that. The other part of the building that I'm not quite sure about yet, but I can see problems that could arise is the SRW. That pathway is going to basically funnel people right down Langside Avenue. Langside Avenue right now is as busy as it gets when people are going to the park and such. But when the SkyTrain is put there, there are going to be a lot of people walking down Langside to try to get to the SkyTrain. And when they hit the bottom of Langside, what they're going to see is a park. And in the summer, it's great to walk across the park, but it's not always summer here, as you know. It rains and it gets muddy and there's snow. And so far, the people who have walked down, Langside and have encountered, muddy soil have actually trespassed through our building. They've actually opened the gate, they've walked through, and we've had, damaged gates and, damaged latches that we've had to replace many times. And I think that's just going to get worse over time. So there's got to be some pathway through the park or some other way to encourage people to go around the park, during those muddy, rainy days that we get. So those are the 3 main reasons. I'd actually prefer to see a lower density building, something in the character of what I'm living in right now, townhomes or at most a 4-story building, that type of thing. Okay, I really don't want to see any more cars jammed in that area. I think there are way too many already, and even if SkyTrain does go in there, I don't think we're going to get rid of all the cars. I just really don't believe that. Okay, and the other thing I want to point out is I've talked to a lot of families who've lived there or moved in there within the past few years. A lot of them are actually starting to move away, and I sort of asked them why, and they feel like it's getting way too dense. There are families that I know personally who have a couple of kids, and they moved away, and one of the reasons that they are moving away is because when they go down Langside and they try to unload their kids, unload groceries, that type of thing, they just can't find parking. And they just feel like there are too many people, too many cars in that area, and it's becoming really, really difficult for them, or had been. Anyways, they've moved away now. And there are other families in the same boat. They come in for a couple of years and they move away. That's not the way we're going to build this kind of neighborhood, is having families come in and live for 2 years and move away because they're feeling crammed. That's not the kind of neighborhood I grew up in, and I hope it doesn't change to that kind of neighborhood. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. There may be some questions. We'll begin with Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ha. It's actually a question that I could have asked of Ms. Bush as well, the previous speaker. Both of you raised the concerns about too many people moving in there, too much traffic, and both of you suggested you'd be more comfortable with the 4-story building instead of the 7-story. But as Mr. Ritchie, the first speaker on behalf of the is the principal of Springbank, said that a 4-story building would be just marginally smaller in the number of units, 71 or 72 units as opposed to 77. So I just want to make sure I understand that so you got no problem with a marginally smaller number of units. The problem is mainly the height of the building then, or what?
Well, I think it's all the factors that I've listed there. It's not just any one thing. You know, definitely one is the size and the number of units is way too big. I prefer to see something much smaller, actually. But at the most, a 4-story, like the ones that have gone up already. The issue is the number of parking stalls, really, and also the way that they're built. You know, this building is going to have multi-level park. There's 2 levels to the parking. I've lived in a building before that had 2 levels for parking, and a lot of residents don't really like it. I mean, it's a parking spot. They've got it if they need it, but it's not really preferred because it's not very convenient for people. Especially if you have lots of groceries. And, where I live, there's actually a very tall flight of stairs that I have to climb. And I've got 2 kids, and they're very young, and I've got one on each arm and trying to hold grocery bags. I prefer not to go up those stairs every day. I prefer to have a loading zone, perhaps, in front of my home. Even if it's for 10 minutes, it doesn't matter. I just want a place where I can drop the kids off, drop the groceries off, and then go park the car. But the way that they've designed parking in the area, in the buildings, it just makes it really inconvenient for people, and people then will have a tendency to want to park on the street. And there are going to be fights. I mean, I've seen it, people yelling at each other for, parking, I can't remember what it's called. It's called double parking, sorry. On the street, that kind of thing, parking in front of fire hydrants. I've called the city many times about that. Parking in the handicap zones, things like that. Happen quite often, and it's because of the way the buildings are built. There's too many people in the way that parking is designed, and that those are all the factors together that I'm really concerned about. It's not just the size.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I had one question, actually, probably for Parks. I assume there was some reference, for example, that when you get to the west end of Langside on your way to the SkyTrain station. Now, I assume that we're planning, in the course of redesigning both whatever redesign has to happen at Coquitlam Park and the redevelopment of the shopping center, that this east-west pedestrian route is connected in some way, although it might not be connected in the next couple of years.
Yeah, through the chair, yes, Your Worship, correct. There is Coquitlam Park is going to be redeveloped long-term. There's going to be some improvements to the park. But the improvements, the connections, pedestrian connections, and this connection, the pedestrian connection east-west here is shown in the official community plan, and we would look to connect residents in this community to the SkyTrain through the park. The question is really the timing. It isn't currently a work item in our capital plan, so it wouldn't be done today, but we could certainly look at what the proponents had indicated here, or the speaker, around a very muddy area there. We could certainly look at what's going on there and make sure that it is functioning as part of that park entry, and that's something we could just do as part of our routine maintenance.
Well, several council members were enjoying it. I know Councillor Reid was there at the Thursday evening neighborhood in the park event a couple of Thursdays ago at that park. And one of the complaints from the soccer coaches was that that field is unusable for much of the winter because of that standing water issue. So I assume that gets corrected no matter what we do moving forward. Okay. And now I promised I'd bring it up to you, and now I brought it up to you in the wrong form. Anybody else? No? Thank you very much, sir. The next speaker is Kathy Bell at 621 Langside.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak as a resident in this neighborhood. I live at the corner of Langside and Breslay, facing Breslay Avenue. And tonight I'd like to focus on how the size of the proposed development is completely unacceptable for this street. Obviously, from a developer's perspective, higher density means maximizing profit from the lot footprint. However, a developer moves in and out of the neighborhood in less than 2 years and on to the next project, and the aftermath of the completed project is left behind for us residents to deal with. So let me start with the during the project construction and the after, based on my own experience living in this neighborhood for 4.5 years. And hopefully Council will see that a much, much smaller development is what would be acceptable for this area. So first, A project of this proposed size means that a neighborhood is essentially taken hostage for at least 1 year. The larger the project, the longer the takeover. So starting from about 6:30 a.m. every weekday, the entire block becomes a construction site. And normally there's WCB rules about construction sites and safety, but we residents are left completely at the mercy of the project. Vehicles block driveways, alleys, and fire hydrants. They box in residents' cars. They swerve around the corners without stopping, and they choke the air for hours with the fumes of idling engines. During their work breaks, workers trespass on properties to eat, take naps, or use water taps. And they throw food waste over lawns and sidewalks. They smoke marijuana next to our homes on the benches that are required on our property, and use extremely foul language in front of children and seniors. Once a worker grabbed my garden hose out of my hand to rinse his boots, and my neighbor kept his child from witnessing a street fight with one group of workers cheering on the others. Needless to say, these takeovers involve dozens of calls to bylaws and law enforcement officials. When we tried to contact them, the developers claimed to have no control over the contractors or the workers, but I find this to be completely unacceptable. So my first request to Council tonight is to require Springbank to arrange for parking for workers at another location, to maintain regular security walkabouts, cleanup crews, and a way for local residents to communicate these issues with them in ways that will not be brushed aside, as what has happened in the past. Secondly, higher density, of course, means more cars and more mailboxes to become the shopping mall of the neighborhood, easy targets of crime. The local paper has noted the recent spike in crime in the Coquitlam area, and due to the installation of the poorest quality of security measures on the initial development, my complex has experienced numerous attempted break-ins to common property and one attack on our mailboxes, causing considerable damage. So I also ask Council to require Springbank to install higher levels of security in terms of mailboxes, locks, and garage door systems, so that would-be thieves are not attracted to these new easy marks. Thirdly, the city's desire to have higher density for transit does not result in fewer cars. The people who buy these units are either families with multiple vehicles, or they are of a socioeconomic class that is not willing to ride buses. Because of a fear of crime, people often prefer to park outside where their cars are visible. Since the Bloom and Easton complexes have been finished, Breslay and Langside are regularly choked with cars, and the street truly has become a one-lane street, much like the despised Bailey Bridge in New Westminster. People turn down Langside to find it's a dead end. They then turn around in frustration and zoom back out. Almost no one stops at the stop sign on Langside, and on this past Saturday, I was almost run into head-on by a person turning right without looking or stopping, and I had to swerve out of the way. The garages of Bloom and Easton open onto an alley. You can see it on the map. And their cars turn in and out of there onto Breslay with minimal visuals due to the parked cars. Springbank's proposed development will have its garage open directly across from that lane, creating even more of a serious traffic hazard. When this building's garbage and recycling bins are put onto the street for pickup, the congestion will be even worse. To turn left now from Breslay onto Smith requires you to edge quite far out onto Smith due to the limited visuals. It's only a matter of time before there's going to be a very serious accident at or near that Breslay-Smith intersection with the alleyways and the parking exits. And adding this many families' cars to the mix is only going to increase the likelihood. And now finally, the zoning for up to 8 stories for this size of street is absolutely ridiculous. Common sense would show that this would be like trying to wedge a pickup truck into a small car parking spot at the mall. No doubt that if this is approved at 7 stories, the precedent will be set for future looming towers already along this crowded and congested street. For this and future applications on Breslay, I thus ask Council to consider the impacts of during and after construction and to approve only maximum 4-story buildings of a size similar to the one that I live in, which is 29 units, that allow for a balanced increase in population, and to insist on the security and safety measures that I have mentioned above, thus making the developer accountable for the impact on the community both during and after construction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No questions? Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that was the last of our registered speakers. Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? Seeing none.
Good evening. Mayor Stewart, council, staff, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Ben Craig. I'm with the Oakdale Neighborhood Association, and I've stood before council a number of times over the years, with a message that our organization would not be in support of new developments in the Coquitlam region without an official community plan in place.
And you have been here many times, but you still have to give your address.
My address?
Yes.
639 Elmwood Street.
Thank you.
So we represent about 600 homes in the Coquitlam region, and we see development after development approved. The Boza Tower going from 26 to 28 stories. Intracorp development on Foster Street. We've got concert property plans on Cottonwood, Blue Sky plans on Foster, Marcon high-rises in the works on Como Lake and Clark, as well as Moorgard plans, and then Coquitlam Plaza. This means crowded roads and streets and schools and malls, stress on infrastructure, all this without a community plan in place. Granted, one is in the making, but it's been years in the making, and it will be years to completion. Where are all the young families going to send their kids to school in this area? So I don't really take issue with tonight's proposal. John and his group have been pretty good at transmitting their plans to local community groups, including us. So my issue is not with this development. My issue is with the city's approval of thousands of new units in the region without a view to the future. I mean, we all understood that high density was coming to this region, It's been on the minds of this council and many councils before you for over 20 years. So why are we in a position where developers are beating down City Hall's doors with no strategy in place? So I'm a financial planner. I wouldn't dream of making an individual investment to a client without a firm understanding of the client's overall financial picture. In other words, I wouldn't make an isolated recommendation if it didn't fit with the overall financial plan. And I think that that's the approach that the council must take. To not approve.
Just a moment, please, Mr. Craig.
Excuse me?
Just a moment, please. There's been a point of order called. Can we turn on Councillor Nicholson's microphone, please? Councillor Nicholson.
It's always nice to hear from Mr. Craig, but he's told us that he's not speaking to the issue.
I know. Yeah.
And we have a great deal ahead of us. Campaign speeches can wait for a few months. Thank you.
Okay. As I spoke at the beginning, you must speak to the item and only to the item that's before us. And so you did acknowledge that you're not here to speak to the item before us, and
I mean, my issue is not with this specific development. The issue is a broader issue, and in fact a more important issue because it impacts the entire region.
So then you can speak to us at OCP time, but tonight is about the land use on this property. And as you know, you've been here many times, we can only hear about the land use, whether this land use is appropriate. You've said it is appropriate. Whether this is the appropriate land use for this property. So I'm left having to rule that Councillor Nicholson's point of order is well taken.
With due respect, I suspect we're going to hear monologue after monologue from a number of councillors tonight based on this development. So I don't think it's too much of a reach to give a few minutes to a resident, not only a resident, but a representative of over 600 homes in the area to discuss the future of our community. I mean, you ask any of my neighbors what our community is going to look like in the coming years. Nobody has a clue.
Then I'll ask you to be a delegation. You can apply to be delegation to a committee meeting, but I'm afraid the rules of public hearings, as you know, I'm sure you know that, were well cited by Councillor Nicholson. I have to rule in favor of the rules that we've all agreed on, and that is we can only receive presentations on the item before us. So you could speak about the inadequacy of transit or the public school system, but you can't speak about those here. You can speak about those as a delegation to council.
Okay. Well, with respect to council and the mayor, issues of infrastructure, mobility in the region, they all relate to this problem. They all relate to this development.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Zurillo had a question.
Yeah, I did have a question for Mr. Craig, is it possible to get a question? Because I think I heard something, him mention something that I wanted clarity on.
If it was related to this project, you can.
It's about the project, yes. So I'm not sure if I can ask that, but
It only falls in relation to the project.
it's in relation to the project.
I'm standing here, so let's...
Yeah, the question is, I think I heard you say that you are speaking in favor of the project in a representation of 600-plus residents in the area?
No, that's not accurate. I am speaking, I don't have particular issues with this development.
Okay.
I'm speaking as representative of my group to express concerns about infrastructure.
That's good. I just
mobility
wanted
in the
clarity on whether you were speaking in favor of the project on behalf of the group. Thank you.
So he didn't express an opinion on behalf of your group related to the project?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good. Are there any other speakers to this item? I'm sure there are. Any other speakers to this item? Oh, are there any other speakers to this item? The third and final time. Seeing none. Oh. You'll have to go get that microphone. Are you speaking to the item?
I actually had a question. I didn't have a place to put it in this and then...
Oh. Yep, okay. So why don't we let you ask your question to the fire chief. Just one moment, please. We'll move microphones. Councillor Nicholson is still up.
Councillor Nicholson hit his button first.
Oh, you're back. Yeah, this is another. So I'm sorry. I thought his microphone was still open from the point of order. Councillor Nicholson first.
No. I stabbed with my finger while Councillor Zarulla was going. So my finger is quicker than that. So.
He's been here a while.
So I'm sorry.
He's been here a while today, actually.
That's right, yes. And Mr. Gilbert's going to retire on his blooper reel. But I asked earlier about the shadow studies, and Mr. Ritchie showed us one, Mr. Hempel showed us one, but I don't have one. And I don't know whether you have additional copies available, and that would be helpful. And I also wanted to ask Mr. Ritchie if he would like to address the requests that Mrs. Bell made. She talked a lot about things that she would like to see happen during construction that would make things better in the neighborhood. And he's not obliged, Mr. Ritchie, but if there was something you wish to say in response to that, it could be helpful to all of us.
It is an odd request, but Councillor Nicholson has opened the door to answers to that question, and if you take the microphone, I have a couple of questions of my own. So,
all right. I think that Kathy Bell's major issue had to do with during the construction process, and I do acknowledge that it is disruptive. I wish there was something we could do. I unfortunately, can you not hear me?
Yeah, if you could get either closer to the microphone or just speak.
I'm sorry, I hear myself really well. So,
okay.
Definitely. Construction is disruptive, and she cited a number of things and we were apprised of them. We were informed of them during our construction when we were building across the street from her. And the unfortunate thing is that we subcontract everything out. People are not our employees, and so when they go on their lunch break, we cannot tell them what to do. We cannot tell them where to park. We do the best we can. We encourage them to park elsewhere, but when it comes right down to it, they can just tell us where to go because they say this is a city street and we're parking on it, and yes, we're working for you, but you can't tell us where to park. And construction workers don't tend to be the most polite gentlemen in the world. If I ever saw anybody smoking marijuana on or around our site, they'd be gone. I would hope that the same would hold true for my superintendent, but I'm not there 100% of the time. I did have one other comment about what she said about how developers are in and out in 2 years. Well, Lot A, where she lives on that map, is I started development on that in 2007. We completed that project in 2010. We started development on the one across the street where the RM3 is, and we just completed that project. We developed the corner of Regan and Dogwood Street. We're not the ones who are actually building it. Somebody else is building it. But we've been in this community for the last 7 years, and quite frankly, I I think Ms. Bush, I think at one point I've tried to purchase her property off her. She's right. She's got two neighbors who are very difficult to deal with. But I hope to be working in this community for some time into the future. I don't intend to be here for 1 year and then gone. For Councillor Nicholson and your shadow study. I grabbed it just before I came up here. Here we go. Should I give it to you, or should I pass it to the clerk to pass on?
Perhaps you'd give it to the clerk.
Yeah, we can circulate that around the table so that people have access to it.
Thank you very much. But on your response to Ms. Bell, I really think that I understand you use contractors and they have subcontractors and greater fees have lesser fees and all that stuff, but it would seem to me that it would be entirely reasonable in a standard construction contract to require that the bylaws of the municipality be observed, and that would deal with a great many parking issues. You don't park at fire hydrants, you don't park across driveways, and you don't block other people's vehicles. And we'll make sure that Ms. Bell has Bylaw's telephone number, because we can help too, but way better for all of us if you get they are your people, whatever the relationship. You brought them there, and we'd like them to be welcomed there.
And I as much as the examples cited don't give any evidence of this, we do try to be, we ask our workers to be good citizens, to not throw things on the neighbor's lawn. I know that when I walk around the neighborhood by myself, if I see anything on the lawn of Evergreen, I pick it up because I think it probably came from one of my construction workers. I ask my superintendent to do the same thing, but I'm not there. I can't be watching every single person every time, and I know that's not an excuse, and we will, we try to be diligent too. But yes, certainly. It is disruptive, and there's not much we can do. Well, there's some we can do about that, but we cannot get rid of it all.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. I just wanted to get some clarity from the fire chief and maybe a little bit more information. Over the weekend, I was thinking about the idea that this is a place that people that have lived in the area for a very, very long time could age in place. And one of the things that the fire chief talked about when I was asking him about the difference between 4-story wood frame and 7-story concrete as far as safety reasons for people with limited mobility. He had mentioned something, and it wasn't called aging in place, but it was called something else, and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind elaborating on it a little bit today, because it was in email, and it was just a sentence.
Through the chair, Councillor Benita Zerillo is referring to a term we use in the fire service called shelter in place. It's a fire tactic if there's times when, rather than evacuating people, some structures lend themselves better than others for a shelter-in-place opportunity instead. This can be extremely important if you have people with differing abilities, or the infirm or the elderly. It's a tactic that some building structures lend themselves better to than others.
And is the 7-story concrete one of those?
Concrete construction of that type of design and in a high-rise configuration such as that height is does lend itself to that fire tactic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I said I will have some questions for you too if you take the microphone, and I thank you for taking the microphone. I was over actually at a Marcon site just around the corner from you, and they actually put up signs saying no construction parking across the front of their neighbor's property as I guess a goodwill gesture, or a friendly neighborhood gesture to prevent their construction crews from taking up all the parking in front of their neighbor's house, the house that obviously remains next to the construction. And so, I've seen lots of developers do that, so I'm astounded by that thing that your construction crews might tell you to go someplace else. But I've also, and and I wasn't going to bring this up, but one of our frustrations here is that I got called to this site, and I know other council members did, the site across the street, not on the north side of Langside, but the RM3 one on the south side, or the one where RM3 is written into it. I can't remember the name of that project, but while that was under construction, your company had taken up both sides of Langside and both sides of Breslay. And I remember at one point I was told, no, the road is closed. And I said, well, you're not allowed to close a road just because it's convenient. And at that point, the only thing on the road was a porta potty in the middle of the road, and I didn't think that that was where it belonged. So we're a little bit frustrated by that, by the way in which the company has, and so we heard from at least one resident that sometimes the neighborliness of your construction crews is less than exemplary. And so I'll put that to you. Go ahead.
First of all, when we were under construction, we did have no construction parking on the north side of Langside, and to be honest, I think that until very close to the end, it was well observed. I would say that when we were doing our finishing trades were on site, whenever I went out there, which is maybe twice a week, I would ask for vehicles to be moved from in front of Langside, from in front of Evergreen, which is the one on the north side. Okay. And you're right. You're right. There were some issues.
No,
I'm not going to.
Construction materials being stored across the street and toilets being placed across the street, yes, on the boulevard where you're not supposed to put them anyway, but across the street seemed odd.
We definitely had issues, and I'm not going to try to blame anyone else. I mean, ultimately, it comes down to us. We are using a different general contractor. We're using a general contractor who does hundreds of millions of dollars in construction every year instead of one that does $20 million in construction every year. We're hoping that we're going to have a more professional approach from them. But if we don't, I'm sure I'm going to be called to task next time I'm here and I'm asking for my next development. I'm going to do what I can to ensure that we have a professional attitude, but that's about all I can say to that.
Your Worship, if I could, sorry.
Mr. McIntyre, now granted this has nothing to do with land use, and so I'm about to rule myself out of order, but Mr. McIntyre.
Sorry, I'll take us further out of order. I hear the comments from council, and I do recall some of the past incidents that happened on the street. Perhaps we can, depending on the council's direction, staff can speak with the applicant afterwards. I think there's a need for a clear construction mitigation plan that addresses these issues. The pre-construction meeting that could be run through so everyone's clear on that. So we go into, if anything was to happen there, a clear understanding of what's expected.
Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you, Mayor Stewart. You kind of took some of the questions I was to deal with. I've had development around me 5 years now. Constantly, everything's almost done now, but I've lived with Monday to Saturday, 7 a.m. to onward, construction vehicles all over my area where I live. You can manage it, and I think the comments from these people here is that I've had developments where it's up to the site manager or your site inspector, and you have one on site, don't you?
Yes.
And so I would say you can manage the whole situation. You can work with your contractors on off-street parking, or what I do for a living, drive a bus. I take guys on transit workers coming in, and all of them need their trucks there. I will tell you the one thing, a couple things about mailboxes. That's not his responsibility. Theft of mailboxes up in my area, it's everywhere. It's an issue. It happens. I pick up my mail every night because it's what we have. It's what it is. It happens, and it hits in bits everywhere. But one thing that gets me, and I think what I'd ask you to do is, I got another question after this, is to have somebody clean up the litter. The one thing that ticks people off in my area it was just the litter from the construction workers in the area. And it's just the parking and all that, it's going to happen as construction going on, but the litter seems the worst part of it. So you could have somebody every day cleaning up the area in the community. I think that would make a big imprint if this goes through. We haven't made that decision yet. The question I have is, if you're to build a 4-story townhouse, it would be closer to the street. It'd be more in people's face than this building. It would be 71 units you could build on that site, or what would be the unit size you could put on that?
I assume you didn't mean four-story townhouse, but four-story apartment building.
Four-story apartment building.
Okay. So wood frame.
Easton on the other side of the lane from Bloom, which is one that we just completed, was, I believe, 71 suites, and Regan's Walk, which is around the corner, that's the Marcon one, I believe is 72 units. And I would suspect that ours would be, they were both came off of 3 lots, and I would suspect that one that we built would be approximately that, bearing in mind that those were both approved under a lower density zoning subsequent to that.
Just what I'm pointing out is that they're really between this development that's pulled back from the road, so it's not, but it is higher, that the units would be 5 or 6 difference between what the 4-story and what this would be.
If we were allowed to build to the maximum density on the site under a 5-story plan, it would likely be the same number of units in just a different configuration.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you. And no question from you, sir. That's fine. To Mr. McIntyre, when they proposed a 4-story building, the planning department said we'd like to see something different. Am I correct?
Mr. McIntyre, is this your idea?
Your Worship, the staff that dealt directly with the applicant are here, so they can elaborate or clarify. I had heard that comment, and I checked into it. The way it was explained to me in an earlier version of the plan, the applicant would come in with a different designer and a different concept altogether. Staff had some real misgivings about that plan. We didn't think that the design, the proposed plan was worth supporting. We urged the applicant to look at maybe a different design approach, and he went away, retained a new architect, and they came in with this concept here.
So there would have been another 4-story building, but the planning department said, no, I would like to see something different. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was the one that actually met with John, so I might as well speak. John and his designer did come in with a different architect, different design. It was not working for the site. We asked John to change his concept, not to change from 4-story any higher, just change the concept as it was developed on the site, and look at a different concept, which meant he did get another architect. In that design review that they did, they identified a number of opportunities, and that's when they said, this is one option. And that's when staff started looking at this option. But staff did not push or encourage for a higher density beyond the 4-story. It was an opportunity that came up. When the architect did propose it, we certainly were open to looking at the opportunities in the TDS area, and it went from there.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you very much.
Actually, it just reminded me of one thing. We're looking for the shadow study that was here a minute ago. Did you have a shadow study for the other half?
I'm sorry?
I saw equinox to equinox across the summer.
Okay.
I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything in the
spring, fall?
Dead winter. Yeah.
Sorry, I was
which
really...
one's that one? What date?
March 21st and September 21st.
So again, equinox to equinox. Do we have anything in the?
Well, I gave you the summer, no?
Okay, so you've given me summer
and spring and fall
and equinox. Do you have anything in the winter?
No.
Okay. So the longest shadows, we haven't seen them.
Actually,
my concern is, say February 15th or November.
To be honest,
anything at all in the winter months?
No.
No. Okay. 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 Thank you. I see no other questions for you. Thank you very much. I'll do it one more time. Councillor O'Neill.
On the shadow plan, then, there was one, I think it might have been the architect that showed it, the plan for the, just an outline of what this proposed building looked like, superimposed over an outline for what a four-story or 5-story one with a peaked roof would look like, and the height was virtually the same, actually, the peaked roof and then this flat roof 7-story. So I'm wondering if the shadow would have been any different with a 4-story. Yeah, that's the one right there. So do you know if the shadow would be any substantially different with that building as opposed to these two buildings? They're going to have roughly the same shadows?
It would be a little bit more extreme with what we have now, because
a little bit more.
It would be a little bit more extreme with what we have now, because the peak of the roof and the way the sun is coming down, but not significantly. You can see where the above the peak on this drawing, anything to the left of the peak when in the morning sun is going to block the morning sun just a little bit more.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay. But to be clear, this is a 5-story building, not the 4-story.
Yeah.
And this is a slope roof, and I don't think we've done any slope roof 5-story buildings ever in Coquitlam. They're almost always flat roofs, so they have a lower shadow profile, particularly in the winter months, which is why I was interested in the winter months one, where that's the time when we get more complaints about shadowing. So
okay.
Don't hide from the winter shadows. Go ahead and present them to us. Allow us to make up.
The shadow study was originally done for Annie, and we were looking for the summer sun for her because she was worried about her.
Got it.
And that's why that was done.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Ritchie? No? Thank you very much. Just a second, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Ritchie. Are there any other speakers to this item? Please step right forward.
I'm Annie McMorris. I live at 104 716 Smith Avenue. And it was my understanding when I bought that we were going to have nothing above 4 stories, and then you changed the plan. So here we are, and this is going to be directly across from me, and directly, that my building is Easton, and this is going to be directly across from Bloom. And you have heard about the parking and where the parking comes out of this. But everybody that I have talked to has said they want nothing more than a 4-story there. We do not want this sore thumb sticking up in the middle of all the 4 stories. We have a mixed, we have single family, we have duplex, we have 3-story, and we have 4-story. And I think that's a pretty good mix in any neighborhood. I don't think we need one 7-story building sticking up in the middle of nowhere. We are going to have high-rises at Coquitlam Plaza, which we knew was in the plan and which I think is where they should go. And I'm also object to any pathway cutting through the middle of the park. And I think anybody that uses that park would object to that pathway leading to the SkyTrain station. You're cutting a park in half. And that is not a good plan. I am really, really upset about this building going in there. And he keeps referring to Annie, that's me, because I'm worried about that shadow. And I think anybody that lives in Bloom should be worried about that shadow. And I don't know when he did these 4 shadow studies, because until I ran into him and several councilors there the last week, he hadn't done a shadow study. So it was done within the last week. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
This is a question for planning. If somebody had come into our planning department 2 years ago to find out what kind of a building could have been built across the street from the 4-story apartment, what would they have been told? Probably.
Through the chair, the official community plan designation, the existing neighborhood plan calls for medium-density apartment residential. There's 2 zones that correspond to that, RM2, RM3. The RM3 zone is what's being applied, and I believe, as Erica pointed out earlier, the height limits in the RM3 zone have been consistent over the years. It's the density and the building footprints that have been modified of late. But the 8-story maximum was the maximum potential into the RM3 zone on that, within that land use designation.
So if somebody had come in to find out, the potential, they would have been told that up to 8 stories.
That's correct. That's what the zoning provides for.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this item? Just a second, Kathy, is a gentleman back there that hasn't spoken yet?
Good evening. I live on 629 Smith Avenue. My name is Attila Bela. Attila Bela.
Bela.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I dropped off my written input about the development in the morning today. My issue is the development is coming up right behind my property. So my backyard and my private I would say private zone is going to be exposed for quite a few people who is going to purchase the apartments in the building. And the other issue is about 2 years ago there was a meeting close by. There is a school on just a couple of blocks above where I live on Smith, and they were talking about the height of the buildings. As you're getting farther from the SkyTrain, the height of the buildings are reducing. This building is going to be higher than the buildings which is closer to the SkyTrain, going to be the SkyTrain. So they said there's a certain transition. This is, as far as I understand, this is breaking that rule because this is going to be higher than the buildings which was already built before. So that's why I'm confused about this, because it's breaking the transition. So that's all.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any other speakers who haven't spoken yet? Ms. Bell.
Stuart, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Nicholson for the issue of calling bylaws. Just to give a sense of the extent of the problem, during the development south of Langside, the Bloom development, myself and my neighbour, Daniel Ha, we each called bylaws at least 2 or 3 times a week. This was constant, or emailed them. I even had the woman there even sometimes calling me back just to see if things had been fixed. We became friends in a really sick way. So it is much more serious than just the odd parking in front of a fire hydrant. And with respect, Councillor Asmundson, the issue of mailbox theft, this is something that developers can address, because the level of security in terms of key systems, lock systems, the cheapest possible pryable mailboxes are installed. And this is something that attracts people to the neighborhood when they see a new development. Ours have been scratched and screw-driven and everything to be opened, and we've spent considerable funds out of strata fees to try to upgrade something that should be standard so as not to be attracting crime. And as soon as a huge building comes in, thieves are thinking of, wow, 77 units of possible credit cards and gift cards that will be sitting there. And I would be very happy to invite you to our complex to show you what has happened over the 4 years and how we've had to upgrade. Sorry, I can't hear you.
No, the reason you can't hear him is because he wasn't recognized by the chair. He's not allowed to speak.
Oh.
Councillor Asmundson, do you have anything to say?
Just to respond, as she said, the point is that we have mailboxes. I have a mailbox, and it's been broken into a number of times where somebody's pried it open and stole mail. And I actually raised that issue through our MPs about the level of security of the mailboxes that are provided from Canada Post. And that was about 2 years ago. We went on this issue about mailboxes and their security and what Canada Post supplies in their mailboxes and the type of problems that there is with mailboxes.
Okay, but these mailboxes are actually not supplied by Canada Post.
Right. These are on the property.
These are on the
common
property.
property.
So
and
is
actually
this the mailbox?
Within view.
Is this mailbox right up near Breslay? Because I think I've seen it.
No, yes, off of the entrance, off of Breslay. It's
In
between,
between
there's a
the-
courtyard in the center of A, and it's actually visible from several units, so the thieves are quite brazen because they know they can get in and get out really quickly. And with the coming walkway that's proposed with this new development, there's going to be really, it's going to be a shopping mall of theft from the SkyTrain right through the park along and you know, to wherever else beyond. And what happens now with that is we have thieves coming through, and in between where it says A and 16, there's a duplex there. There's a gate, and we have some like, vegetable gardens. It's a highway of people cutting through from Langside to the lane, and we've had numerous thefts of property because people know, and that's only going to exacerbate the problem. So what we ask is that developers take some responsibility for making good quality security systems right from the get-go, rather than having crime involved, police involved, and you know, the upset to the neighborhood.
Well, I did make a note that your mailboxes do seem to be about the flimsiest I've ever seen, and I hate to say that on public television, but some kind of a security gate or something is going to have to be, I think, the
And we have a small
because
complex, 29 units. It's difficult to budget for such measures when these things happen. So I think this is part of a larger community accountability when these developments are approved.
Okay, and Councillor Wilson.
Do you mind if I ask you a question?
Sure.
We're really struggling here, trying to make an informed decision. So I guess what I would ask you is, if you had your choice between the proposed development, so a skinnier 7-story with a bit of a setback, or a more square 4-story with a similar number of units, you know, would you have a preference?
Well, actually, I don't personally care if it's shaped like a pyramid. It's the number of people that are going to be clogging this very, very narrow street and turning from where it says RM3, there's an alley. Between there and Smith, it is so congested, cars are just whipping around corners. And as we add and add and add huge numbers of families along there, it's going to come close. As I mentioned earlier, just on Saturday, I was really lucky that the woman turning right from Langside was driving very slowly, because she would have hit me straight on. And this kind of incident is going to happen. And people with children in the neighborhood, such as my neighbor, Michelle, playing around. We just don't want our children playing around anymore. It's become so serious with the increase of traffic. My issue is not necessarily the shape. It's the number of people that are going to be rapidly added to this very, very narrow street.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? The last time I got to 3. Yes? Mr. Ha.
Sorry to take up so much time on this item. I actually wondering if I could ask a question. One of the things I was mentioning earlier is about the concern about parking and all the traffic. I'm just wondering if City Council or the planners have any plans to put in permit parking or any kind of loading zones on the street, not the alley, for this newly proposed building, or anywhere around there, actually.
Mr. Radley.
Through your worship, there's no particular plans for specific restrictions. There is a loading zone and loading area for this particular development. One of the things that staff did realize now, we've recently adopted some multimodal design guidelines for our streets, and that's Breslay is being built to that standard ultimately as development proceeds. To that 10.5 meter standard, which will provide us parking on both sides and 2 lanes of traffic. And there will also be some curb bulges at the corner with Smith to also improve visibility of pedestrians at the corner and improve those. Those will occur over time, unfortunately. Langside, I understand, it was built to an 8.5 meter standard, which is our old standard. It does provide for parking both sides, but it is a narrower corridor, as people have been referencing tonight. But there's no specific plans for particular parking restrictions along streets, other than, near driveways and intersections and that kind of thing.
Well, if there's nothing in the works, I strongly would like to encourage council and the planners also, to look into that. I think that would solve a lot of issues, not just for this building, for any building that goes into that space or any of the other lots as well. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other speakers to this item? Are there any other speakers to this item? The third and final time, are there any other speakers to this item? Any paperwork that needs to be handed in? Seeing none. Oh, she's coming forward with some paperwork. And on that note, I'll declare this item closed. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Now, as with each one of these items, we'll be dealing with them later in the evening, but you don't have to stay by any means.
Item 2 concerns 911 Dansey Avenue and Bylaw 4499. The intent of Bylaw 4499 is to amend the City of Coquitlam zoning bylaw number 3000 to rezone the property located at 911 Dansey from RS1 one-family residential to RT3 triplex and quadruplex residential.
Ms. Tiffany.
Good evening again, Your Worship, council members. This site is located on the north side of Dansey Avenue between Joyce Street and Blue Mountain. The site, as well as the surrounding area, is designated under the official community plan as neighborhood attached residential. Zoning on the site and adjacent to the site, north, south, east, and west, is RS1 two-family residential. The site currently contains a single-family residence, and the applicant is requesting rezoning to RT3 triplex and quadruplex residential in conformance with the official community plan designation to facilitate a quadruplex development. Staff are recommending all final readings to rezoning bylaw 4499.
Thank you. And we have one registered speaker for 911 Dansey. That's Christina Windsor at 903 Dansey. Ms. Windsor.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Christina Windsor. I live at 903 Dansey Avenue. I'm not at all opposed to the development, just a little concerned about our children's safety. My application is in to run a licensed home daycare. I'm 2 doors down from 911. I was told that the access to parking would be through the back lane. I'm just a bit concerned because it's no through back lane. There's only one entrance, and our children walk down that back lane to go to school. The school is Lord Baden-Powell Elementary. It's about 15 feet from this back lane. So I'm just wondering whose responsibility it would be to possibly put in a couple speed bumps at the entrance or possible lighting. It's very dark. There's a lot of trees and bushes, coniferous trees, so they're not going to lose their leaves in the wintertime. Yeah, that's basically all I want to say with regards to that. I'm just a bit concerned about the safety of our children. The back lane is used by our local children and our neighbors' children. They ride their bikes down there, and it's a pretty busy back lane with very small children. So thank you.
Anyone?
Through your worship, it's something we can take up with engineering department in terms of the speed humps. That's something we can talk to them about, and it's not something that's come forward as part of this application to date. The applicant is required to do half road improvements both on the lane as well as on the fronting street of Dansey.
Okay. So you'll take that up with them. Good. Any other speakers to this item? Want to step forward? I'm sorry. Hang on a second. If you would hold on a second. Councillor Hodge. I didn't see mine.
I just want to follow up on a couple of questions on the road and parking. I did a drive-by a couple of days ago and looked, and I noticed we've got asphalt curbs. I think it's certainly on the north side. And I'm assuming we're going to go to full width on there. I'm just sort of trying to figure out where we're going to have street parking here. I notice on the other side, directly across, it's very sloped, and there's actually no parking on the street because the lawn goes sort of almost, on a down, almost sort of 3 feet drop. And so I'm just trying to sort of visualize what we're going to have and what the street's going to look like, given that it is a main route through to the school at the end of the street.
Through your worship, yes, in terms of the frontage of the development, it is proposed to be widened on the development frontage. It will provide the opportunity for parking. 3 stalls on the frontage on Dansey would be provided. With future, presuming that development continues along the corridor, there'd be increased opportunity to expand that same parking along the north side, as you referred to, and the south side, as you also referred to, is sloping and provides limited opportunity for parking.
And of course, to extend that sidewalk or curb would require the other owners to do a land change. If somebody were to knock down the existing house and just build another house, that wouldn't initiate curbs or sidewalks or anything else. It's only when it comes forward for a land use change that we get that. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship. These properties are also in the neighborhood attached residential areas, and they could come forward with applications for similar type of projects that would necessitate the applicant doing frontage improvements.
Okay, and currently is that street, I guess, is quite wide. It's built to the older standards, so it's wide now, and I'm assuming it's going to be even wider. Or is it just going to be? It's really going to just depend where the curb is placed then. Curb is probably where it is now. It's just going to go to cement, or is the curb actually? Is the street actually going to get wide?
Your Worship, it does get widened toward the development side, towards the north. It's only 5.5 meters wide, and it's working toward an 8.5 meter standard.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Councillor Rasmussen.
I partially answered my question. So this property here will be required to widen the lane, and because it's a very narrow dead end. The other question is that this lane doesn't go through, but on your drawing here, it shows that there's a Charland and there's a laneway down that side there. There's no, this just dead ends here.
Ms. Tiffany.
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's correct. Councillor Rasmussen, that lane in the back of this proposed development does dead end just before Blue Mountain.
It's I drove down there, and that's a narrow lane. That's probably a very old standard. It wouldn't be the standards we have today for a lane in there, and Councillor Hodge touched on it. If the other properties don't develop through a rezoning, we won't get that extra width within the lane to widen it out, would we?
That's correct, Your Worship. Lane widening would normally be deferred till development proceeded. We do have, annually in our engineering budget, we do have a budget for logical extension of works by developers. However, that is money that's well sought after in terms of connecting sidewalks, missing little segments, that kind of thing, and it is well prescribed. So not due to the level of traffic and use of this lane, I'm not sure whether that would rise up among all of the priorities that are coming forward for that budget.
So this lane, would this lane on this development, just so I heard you correctly, would not be developed right away? It would be developed when at the other properties as a
Sorry, Your Worship, for the confusion. This lane on the development's frontage would be built.
Okay.
Yes. on the north side of the property will be built to the current lane standard. It's just that beyond the property boundaries, it'll transition to the existing lane and be narrow from that point on.
They don't develop or come in for rezoning, as Councillor Hodge pointed out. There is no requirement to widen the lane.
That's correct, beyond the development frontage and the transition.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we'll eventually have to deal with that perhaps in 50 years. But Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I also drove down the lane, and like Ms. Windsor said, it's quite overgrown. Do we have rules about how trees should be kept on lanes?
Your Worship, we do, and we do have an active program to go out and respond to overgrown growth, so we can send notices to local residents. Our engineering department does that on a regular basis.
All it would take would be somebody to make a phone call and they'd get a notice. Because it looked like a lot of the houses on that lane were pretty overgrown. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. With the lane widening, would you have to acquire some of the other properties, or does the city own enough width there to widen the lane?
Yes, Your Worship. The lane would only be widened on the development's frontage on the north side, and there is sufficient road or lane dedication at that point to provide those improvements. And they don't have to acquire any additional land on neighboring property.
Okay, now, also, I noticed with a lot of traffic from the lanes now, we're approving some development from the lanes. What about snow removal? We don't remove snow from lanes, haven't for years. How are you going to handle the snow removal for the traffic?
Your Worship, I can... Perhaps Mr. Diazegi would like to comment on that. However, typically through a snowfall event, we prioritize snow response, and lanes. Typically, by the time we get to the lanes, the snow is melted in the Lower Mainland area. It could be just because of the primary and secondary response routes. But Mr. Diazegi may wish to comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Diazegi, have anything or no?
Nothing to add, Your Worship.
Apparently they're going to need a snowblower for this property in order to get out Joyce. But we have speaking of snow, we have a representative of the owner here, I think, who wanted to speak. You've done it before in this chambers, but could you please state your name and address for the record, Mr. Kingsbury?
Yeah, my name is John Kingsbury. I live at 2380 Haversley Avenue in Coquitlam. A tough day today. My architect father has heart issues, so she's not able to attend, so you have to put up with a rookie here. To the lady's concerns about this property, as there's in a fourplex or a threeplex zoning, the complete lane will be rebuilt to a city standard. There's a ditch on the one side of the lane, and so we'll be doing the full width lane behind the property. The two properties closest to Blue Mountain Park are the same size, square footage, 10,000, so there'll probably be 3 or 4 plots go on them, so they'll want to do the full lane as well. As well, on the front of that street, we've given extra property from the front of our property to put in right up to city standards to make the street wider, because that street is quite narrow going down to the elementary school. So we're going to put new sidewalks in, new roads and new curbs right in front of our property, and even a little bit into the neighbors and the neighbors on the side. The fireman lives next door to the west, and the people on the end are development people. You'll probably see duplexes on both of those lots, which means that they'll need to put the lane and road improvements in. And then the 2 big lots on the side, we're optioning to build 2 more if we're successful to sell this fourplex. We're building a fourplex that's back to back, but actually looks like a duplex. And we're using an aging in place, which we're all doing tonight. So it's going to have the capacity to have all the livability on one floor, and then an upstairs with 2 or 3 bedrooms if you have grandchildren coming to visit. So it's going to be an interesting concept. It went over really well in Cloverdale. We hope it sells well here. I think it's a good concept for people who don't want to build or live in apartments or 5-story high-rises or whatever. They each have their own yard in front and back, and I think they'll be pretty appropriate for living people with assisted issues or even young families down the street from the elementary school.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, any other speakers to this item? I'll declare this item closed.
The next item, item 3, pertains to 1150 Madore Avenue and Bylaw 4501. The intent of Bylaw number 4501 is to amend the City of Coquitlam zoning Bylaw number 3000 in order to rezone the property located 1150 Madore Avenue from RS1 one-family residential to RT3 triplex and quadruplex residential.
Good evening again. This site is located on the south side of Madore Avenue with frontage also on Howe Place. The site and the surrounding area is designated neighborhood attached under the city's official community plan. Zoning on the site and to the north, east, and west is RS1 one-family residential. Zoning directly to the south is RT1 two-family residential. The site currently contains a single-family resident. The applicant is requesting rezoning to RT3 triplex and quadruplex residential in conformance with the city's official community plan designation to facilitate a triplex development. Staff are recommending final readings to rezoning bylaw 4501.
Thank you. The applicant, architect Yoshi Mikamo, is here. There we go. And after Mr. Mikamo, it'll be Neil Wood.
Good evening. My name is Yoshi Mikamo. I'm a representative of Yamamoto Architecture. This property gave us 3 difficult conditions. The first one is the site has 2 streets, facing 2 streets, north and south. And secondly, the site is sloped from north to south. It's quite steep. And third, the view. There are many single-family properties sharing the nice view to the south. And with those conditions, when the project was initialized, we decided to minimize the building mass, the building height. That was our main focus on this development. And can I change? As you see on the context pictures, there are some single-family houses beside us. The top and the middle one, that's the subject site. On the right, the 2-story single-family house, which is quite massive and taking a lot of view from the property on the north side, which I believe. And the east, on the left-hand side, that's the kind of bungalow type, single-story, single-family house. We try to keep the same building mass and develop the affordable housing through this project. This is the site plan. You see the Madore Avenue is on top.
Sir, could you speak either closer to the microphone or a little louder?
There's a shared driveway coming from Madore Avenue to the duplex. The north building is a duplex with the single car garage, and there are 1 open parking space for each unit.
Okay, I'm turning 55 this week, and perhaps it's my ears. Oh, stop it. We're going to get you a portable microphone here.
I think the challenge just is looking at the screen while
exactly
speaking.
Yeah. So this way, just put this microphone up right up against your chin as you're speaking.
So north building, the duplex, and the south building, that's the single unit. And between those two buildings, there are outdoor private space for the duplex. And the south side, the single unit, it has their own driveway from the house place, and then there are outdoor private space facing on the street. And this is the floor plans. Each unit has 4 bedrooms, which is quite good size for and appropriate for the small family or even large family. This is the single unit, same thing, the 4 bedrooms on the second floor. And this is the building. The top one is the facade from the Madore Avenue.
Sir, can you speak up a little bit more, please? And just put it right up against your mouth. There you go.
Anyway, so as I said, this site has a view. Actually, this area has a view to the south. So our goal was to reduce the building mass. And to achieve that, we introduced the contemporary style, which doesn't have any steep, hip, or gable roof. Right now, the existing house is about 20 feet high from the existing grade to the roof pitch. And this building is about the same height, except those two, one pop-up and one shed roof. That's exceeding 20 feet, but our main roof is 20 feet high from the existing grade. So we are not exceeding the existing building height, I mean the existing house building height, and try to protect the view from the property from the side. And on the lower build, the elevation on the lower side, see the rear building is much smaller, and it will be completely hidden behind the duplex building. So I don't think this building is obstructing anybody's view. And that's the elevation on the court's private yard side, which is behind the duplex. And this is the building from the house place. The material-wise, we use the hardy plank siding, which is a fiber cement board, and some natural wood siding. So it looks like the well-built house when it's built. I think this will bring the good standard for this area. This is the section. We are proposing 3 variances for this development. One is the frontier setback, which is reduced from 7.6 meter to 6.4 meter. And for the reason for this is, the outdoor private space between those 2 buildings. We would like to maximize the space, and we went back and forth with the planning department and see what we can do. And the conclusion was to reduce the frontier setback, and also on both sides. But after studying this development, I think if there any other similar development comes to this area, most likely they would have to ask the same thing. So this condition is not applied to our project only. And second variance is roof eave, the projections for roof eave or entry canopy. Because of the frontier setback reduction, these eaves and the covered porch area comes forward together. So this is triggered another variance. And third one is the wall height. This only applies to east-south corner of the duplex because of the slope is quite steep from the front yard, and also a little bit there's another slope from west to east. So the corner is the lowest spot of this duplex. So that's the only issue for this building. But I believe what we are asking for, the variance, is very minimum, and also as I mentioned before, this condition will probably apply to all similar development in this area. So I believe this design is suitable for this area, and I'd like to ask for the support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got some people with questions here. We'll begin with Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll tell you, I'll be frank with you, I'm sure not impressed with the design. Far from it. That really, you know what, I'm not going to say anything more than I should say, but I'm not impressed with that architectural design. Thank you.
There's not much like it in Millardville, is there? Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about consultation with other neighbors. The design and has there been communication as the design was going forward with neighbors around, beside, behind? Was there any kind of community consultation as the design evolved?
I haven't done any communication with neighbors by myself, but my client has been talking to several people in the area. And what I've heard is the people are concerning about building height and also traffic. Actually, I forgot to mention the zoning bylaw requires four parking space for this site, but we are proposing 6. The reason is the most of the family has at least 2 cars, and when we provide 4, at least 2 of them would be parked on the street. And since we are introducing 2 buildings, 3 units into this single-family house area, we didn't want to spread out our development to the street. We'd like to keep what happened on the site is on the site. So the 2 parkings, the all open parkings on the front yard, that will be screened by landscape, shrubs and trees, so it won't be so noticeable from the street side. And that's one thing I forgot to mention, but that's one of the considerations.
Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm afraid I found it somewhat difficult to follow some of what you were saying, and I thought I heard you make reference to a variance necessary in wall height. Is that?
I'm sorry, yes, because the site is sloped, and lower side, when the grade is sloping down, the lower side, the wall exposed a little bit more than the front side, and the higher side. So when the wall height, the maximum 6.1 meter, but we are about 12 inches over the height because of the natural slope of the site. And that's what I'm asking for, the variance.
Okay, so I'll ask staff. I don't see that variance in the report, but did I simply miss it?
I can bring that.
No, I'm sorry.
Through your worship, the application as proposed would require several variances. The variances would be for the front lot line to reduce from 7.6 meters to 6.4 meters. And for the rear lot line, that would be along Howell Place from, again, 7.6 meters to 6.4 meters. There's also a few signing exception variances that are being requested. One is along Madore. It would include the box windows and the entrance roofs, where they would need to be reduced slightly. I think it's a total variance of about 2 meters for those particular signing exceptions. And there's another one along for the unit that's facing Howell Place. As a slight reduction, a siding exception again for the same box window, for a similar box window, again about a 2.3 meter variance.
And the wall height variance that he just described?
To our knowledge, no. At this time, we do not anticipate perimeter wall height variance. Pretty sure that we would have caught that as part of the development permit review, because we do have building permit staff do take a close look at these. But the variances that I've outlined are the ones that are proposed.
Okay, this is a bit challenging for me because I understand those will come to us with the development variance permit. They're not being decided on tonight, but at this stage in the process, if there are variances that I will have great difficulty with when the DVP comes forward, it's only fair for me to tell the proponent that in order that he's well informed. But they're not all described in this report, and frankly, I'm not a planner or an architect, and you were talking about 2.4 meters and boxed windows, and they don't mean a whole lot to me. And I don't think it's fair to ask you to try and explain them to everybody here at 25 after 9. So I will simply say that I will be looking at those and considering them when if this goes forward and ultimately we look at the development variance permit. But I have to ask Mr. Yamamoto, again, you described the consultations with the neighbors, and one of the things you recognized was that there were concerns about traffic. And your response to that was to tell us that you had provided extra parking. And extra parking provides extra cars, and that provides extra traffic. So I have to tell you that's not a great response to traffic concerns.
Yes, but at least realistically, most of the family most likely have 2 cars, especially living in a little bit suburb off from the main part of the Coquitlam. And if we don't provide enough parking space on the property, those other cars will be on the street. I think it won't be beneficial for the area because of that might ruin the streetscape. I think it would be nice to have those parking space behind the well-landscaped area. Unfortunately, yes, number of the traffic will increase because there are 3 units. But one good thing is we have 2 streets, so it will be distributed to 2 cars on the house place and 4 cars on the Madore side. So it's not like all of a sudden 6 cars will be on the one street.
Well, I will credit you for forthright honesty in making it clear that there'll be lots of cars and consequently lots of traffic. That, I'm afraid, agrees with some of your opponent's points. So we will wait and see how that weighs out in the balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mikamo. There's questions for 3 more councillors. Councillor Wilson. Wait.
Excuse me. Sorry, it's a question for you. My question was also about parking, and if it's possible to get the overview. Yeah, I guess that one. Oh, no, that one would be good. No.
Sorry, I will just bring up this one.
Now, on the duplex side, basically it looks like tandem parking in that driveway, and I'm just wondering, we don't want the driveway let down to be too wide because then there won't be the opportunity to have much street parking, but if we kept the let down the way it was, but widen the driveway on the way to the let down so that a car could be closer towards the outside of the lot. That way, if a car had to get out of the garage, they wouldn't have to move the car at the end of the driveway. Does that make sense? I'm just thinking if there's a car in the garage and a car in the driveway, you're not going to be able to get the car out of the garage.
Yes, actually, it may look like a tandem parking, but actually not. It is not a tandem parking. Each unit of the duplex has a single car garage, which is straight down from the shared driveway. And shared driveway is only 4.5 meters, so it's not something that the people can park the car there and another car can just drive by. The actual open parking is in front of those units, which runs horizontally, and it's paved by a paving block with a different surface treatment compared to the driveway. And when this parking space is not used, it will probably appear as the...
you know, sorry, I didn't realize that was surface parking. Thanks.
No.
Okay. Well, this is surface parking here.
Oh, that's service parking.
Yeah.
I see it now.
That answers my question. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I think it's called Attachment 5 here, if you can call that up. It's a view of the buildings. I've got a question about it. I'll just scroll backwards here if you can, and I'll say which one. That one. Oop, back. There. Okay, so there's just something that appeared here that I didn't see anywhere else. On the bottom right building, the illustration there, building number 1, this appears here. It looks like on the roof, it looks like is that a railing and glass siding? Or what is that? It looks like it's a roof deck.
No.
It's the metal roof.
Yes, it's metal roof.
Oh, I see. Okay, it looked like it was straight up, and maybe it was a panel. It's that
Badly distorted elevation view.
That's the elevation of the roof. Okay, I was wondering about that. Whether you're planning patio parties up there or something like that. Okay, thank you. That answers my only question. Thank you.
Yep. And Councillor Reid.
Thank you. As we move into housing choices, which is something we're trying to do so that gently redensifies areas, I'm having a little difficulty when staff keeps quoting to me how many on-street parking spaces there are available. On-street parking is not for these units, and I mean, I know you have parking on here, but I think when we move into a neighborhood so that they think that where there was one house, now there's going to be 3, and whatever parking there is going to be taken up, obviously, and probably half the other parking. I have difficulties with that. I also wondered when a development comes in and the developer is going out to see the neighbors, do you require them to go out with color photographs of what things are going to look like and finishes and things like that? Do you ask that? It's part of form and function, I know, but I'm trying to figure out a way to ease this housing choices into a neighborhood. And if they don't get all the information, it's not going to look good. And that concerns me. And when you have future development variance permits, you've listed 1 on page 3, but apparently there's 3 or 4 more as well. And these are things I'd like to know at this stage. I like to know them because if I'm going to approve something that's a rezoning for something different, I really have to know what it's going to look like on the lot, and I think the neighbors deserve to know that too. So when we come to rezoning, it's good because it's going to be another use, but is it going to fit in? So those are just comments. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mikamo. And next speaker is Neil Wood, followed by April Bussey or Rob Mead. Neil is at 1169 Madore.
Thank you, Council. As you mentioned, Mayor, I'm 1169 Madore. I'm in the cul-de-sac. You run right into my house if your brakes don't work. And I would like to thank Councillor Hodge for calling me last night after I sent my emails out. I apologize for the lateness, but as absolutely nobody I know on the street or anywhere had any idea about this until the sign went up, and I've been on holidays and whatnot, it was a bit of a last-minute endeavor. You know how these things sneak up to you when you have a job and a family. And many other councillors actually did acknowledge my email, which is very nice. I appreciate that. I'll start my sort of preamble with I am not entirely in favor, and I've spoken against the official community plan. I believe it's a very broad stroke thing, and our community has been included in it inappropriately. That may not be the topic of tonight's meeting, so I won't go on too much about it, but it is inappropriate for our community and the way it is. It may be appropriate for other areas that are inside the official community plan. I'm going to be a bit disjointed because I've been making notes as I've been hearing things, but I did notice, and I am an engineer, I'm an engineering manager, so I look at some details on numbers, that there's a 6.4 meter setback, and I'm trying to estimate how wide a car is in my head as I'm sitting there, and I'm going to go conservatively, it's 2.5 meters. And then that's up against the house, so you got to have, what, yay far, 2 meters to open your door and get to your house, and then you got to have another meter on the other side for the passenger or the driver to get out on the other side. That leaves officially 90 centimeters for all this green space and landscaping that they're talking about that's going to hide the vehicles. So these are the type of sneaky things that I hope don't get passed through. So back to my letter, which I emailed out. I am writing to express my opposition to the application at 1150 Madore Avenue. My family and I live at 1169 Madore Avenue, just down the street from proposed development. And I call it development because it's not a home, it's a development. I know it's been crossed out there, but I do have 2 daughters, young ones. They ride their bicycles in the street in the cul-de-sac. They play with the neighbors' kids. I walk up and down with my dog and chat to my neighbors, and I and my neighbors, well, I won't speak for them officially, do not feel that the proposed development is appropriate for the neighborhood for the several reasons I'll speak to. The proposal is a triplex and is so ridiculous, I can't believe it is seriously being considered at all. There is absolutely no way that a triplex in this neighborhood is reasonable and should be allowed. My only guess is that the real reason for the application for a triplex development on that property is to soften the blow of a duplex. Even a duplex is completely out of character for our nice street. There is gaps between our houses. We're not accustomed to having walls of mansion up. I bought my house largely because of how nice the street is. If the proposed development were in place when I viewed this property about a decade ago, I would have had serious reservations about purchasing it. Money is not the main object of my proposal here. I do realize that in some money-grubbing ways, in a pure elitist society in the 1%, I could probably make more money if I could rezone and put 3 on my own property. I do not believe it's in the community's interest, and I know that my neighbors, some of them have fairly large lots, could have probably attempted to do this in the past and have not. I do think that the value in the neighborhood is partly the neighborhood and the way it appears, and building this development would diminish and have a negative financial impact on my ability to sell my home. We have chosen to live here precisely because we don't want to live on a street with this sort of development. Again, I was doing a little rough estimates. I have not seen the proposal until I walked in here today, the details, but approximately 6,000 square feet is proposed. 6,000 square feet of house. I have a big house, and that's double the size of my house. I guess it's double of most of the sizes of houses on that street. I do not believe that the person who will be profiting from the proposed development lives in the neighborhood. I see no reason why the many people on the street should be punished so that some developer could make money. Due to Madore being a dead-end street, I already occasionally have cars roaring down the street and turning around and then roaring back out. They tend to be from the couple of rental units that already exist on the street. It is a danger to mine and other people's children. Having a triplex on the street will only increase the traffic and cause more parking issues, although it's been somewhat addressed here. I would say, and I'm going to deviate from my little letter here, is that I'm not particularly anti-rental, but you can walk down a street and you can pick out the rental houses. Everyone knows it. The houses on our street are mostly owner-occupied. They're very well kept up, they're well maintained, and they're civil people. The houses that have not been owner-occupied are a somewhat lesser standard, let's just say. You walk across Marmont to the other side where duplexes have been allowed for some time, and it is very obvious. I do not want my community to become the other side of Marmont. I have some examples later. In my survey of duplexes, and this is duplexes, not triplexes, there are between 4 and 6 cars between duplex. Increasing that by 1/3 means 5.2 to 7.8 cars, which apparently the developer acknowledges there'll be a lot of cars, that would be attached to this proposed development. I believe there's currently 1 car. Traffic side, okay, I'll skip that part, sorry. When I see duplexes on the other side of Marmont, there tends to be a field of asphalt in front of them, with cars scattered everywhere, parked on the side of the road, double parked, which I will show pictures of later. Sorry for being disconnected again. An important point, and I do think that somebody else is going to bring this up, but it does bear because I've had a personal near-death experience there, is when you do pull out, I mean, this map cut short, but if you look up there where Madore comes on to Marmont, it is parking on both sides of the street there. Madore, Howes are one-lane streets because there's cars parked on either side of them. And because Marmont is a bit of a speedway, I mean, there's no stop signs or lights from top to bottom. Cars come in and out of Madore at a considerable rate and immediately into a one-lane thing. So if you're coming down in there, I nearly had a guy take my nose off and screech out of the way just the other day before I even knew about all this, but it is sort of appropriate. In my submission, you see, and this is the walk I took around last night, the first picture is a note of the gravel parking lots and the multiple vehicles just sort of parked randomly about. I would hope not to see that, but occasionally, even in nice places, people end up parking on grass lanes and areas. The second picture shows the rows of cars and the lack of any sort of parking. It's just it's a field of asphalt and then a house. That's another thing I don't want to see. There's some other pictures of horrible duplexes. I'd like to speak to the multifamily dwelling that is to the south of this. I don't know how it ever got there. It's always been there, but it's a dump. And just because there's one dump, it doesn't mean we should let another place in. This might be very nice when it's built. I mean, who knows, architects and nice finishing. But after there's been half a dozen renters through it, who knows? It'll be just like the rest of them. And Mayor is saying, look at my beautiful houses that are in the area now. I do not believe that the proposed development fits with those. Skipping down, when I was speaking with Councillor Hodge last night, we had quite a long discussion. Something more amenable would maybe be subdividing that lot and putting 2 smaller houses in that then would be appropriate for a small family as starting out people who would likely be owner occupied. It might be something that's more acceptable to the community than the existing sort of wall, which does, by the way, is saying it's the same height as what's there. The height of what's there is only a small percentage of the width of the lot, whereas what's being proposed is essentially full width of the lot. So there's no gap in between it or around it. Thank you for your time.
Okay, if you want to hang on a second, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Wood. I have to admire somebody who knows how to spell his first name.
Thank you.
So do I. Could you take me back through right where you began? You talked about the 6.4 meter setback and the impact on opening car doors and stuff, and I'm afraid I couldn't visualize it and couldn't follow
Yeah,
you.
so
The setback is from the front lot line, say, to the front of the building.
So I imagine that...
Not where you park your car.
So there's, there'll be, I think, some improvements with this. So there'll be a curb, a sidewalk, and some city right-of-way or something like that, right? And then the property starts. Mm-hmm. And I assume setback, and again, I'm not an architect, but the setback must mean the property line to the first nearest point of the building.
Yeah.
Right? So then, so that distance was stated as 6.4. I'm estimating a vehicle is, I don't know, 8 feet wide or something like that.
Yeah, but excuse me, but the vehicle comes in lengthways, right?
No, but it turns and goes parallel to the house, and I think that's what we were discussing earlier, right? The laneway goes, the driveway goes straight in.
The two surface ones off of Madore or off First or
They
Dansey.
go straight into the garage, and you do a 90-degree to the parking spot, I think is what we cleared up earlier.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Yes, I gather that there's a straight into the driveway, or garages, and then the 90 degrees that park.
Right, so you have to fit a car between the house and city property.
Yeah, and there are no cars that are 8 feet wide. They're all about 5 feet wide, but
6,
And
maybe.
I guess I would have to ask staff, I presume there's a standard for a parking pad, and presumably this meets the standard, is that?
Through your worship, it does meet the standard. I think maybe what is being referred to is off of Madore Avenue. There's a parallel surface parking proposed on site.
Parallel to the garage.
Parallel, yeah.
Alongside the garage door.
Yeah, exactly. So parallel to Madore, there's 2 surface parkings. They're apparent on attachment 4 of council's package, labeled surface parking. And I think those stalls are adequate width to provide for the parking. I think the gentleman was trying to raise the issue about limited remaining space for landscaping between there and the property line.
That's correct.
yeah, attachment 7, which is the landscape plan, might give you a better illustration of that.
This doesn't seem like a lot of space for landscaping to me.
I take your point. You do that better than, just as well as you spell, and I don't.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. You said you didn't find out about this until the sign went up.
That's correct.
Did you not receive a letter in the mail about this project before the sign went up?
No, the letter came several days later.
Okay. And how long ago did the sign go up, in your opinion?
I'm going to say 2 weeks ago.
Okay. My question for you is when you look at this development, it looks like a fairly, I mean, I can understand what you're saying in terms of the width and all that, but it looks like a very high quality built, finished property. Why do you assume there'll be renters in there?
Well, there's 3 houses in one. I assume the owner can't live in all 3 of them at the same time.
But you don't think he might want to try to sell the units?
I'm not exactly sure how those property rights work, but usually when you see duplexes, they end up in at least half rental.
I think the older ones, but the newer ones I think usually are sold. That's just what I ask. That's why I asked. Maybe this is to staff. What size of house, if there was just a single house right now being built on that lot, what would be sort of the approximate maximum size? And would they be allowed to have a suite and a carriage house, or just one?
Your Worship, the subject property zoning is RS1, so that's our single-family residential. But there is no FAR maximum in terms of the building size. There is a site coverage, I believe it's 45%. That in combination with the setbacks, the 7-meter front and back and 1.5-meter side yards, that defines a building envelope. I'd have to do a little bit of math here to figure out just what that translates into. 3,000-4,000 square foot house, probably something in that range. And it's correct that under the RS1 zone, secondary suites are permitted as long as they meet certain building code requirements.
Okay, so sorry, you say approximately 4,000 square feet, including a basement?
That would probably not include the basement. I'd have to do some calculations just to see what it would work out to, but I'm just ballparking a house size in that neighborhood, in that location.
Okay. Because you guessed it was around 6,000, this proposal here, right? That was your rough
Well, it says 3 units between, I don't know, something like 1,600 and 2,050. So I just estimated 2,000 times 3.
Because there's so many areas in Coquitlam where there's very, very, very large houses that have suites. Sometimes one legal suite, sometimes a second illegal suite. And so I guess, we're trying to figure out what's best in each community, right? And so, the thing I'm struggling with is what's better in this lot, a monster house with a suite, or, a duplex at the front and a single house on the other side, right? And so in your opinion, what would you rather have, this or a monster house with suites?
Monster house is a fairly negative term. I think a nicely designed 4,000-foot house would be acceptable.
Okay. Thanks.
I do hear my neighbors up there. They probably don't want a 6-story thing across the street from them, but
okay.
2 times 2,000 adds up to 4 still as well.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Set. Are there any other speakers to this item?
I want to ask a question.
Oh, go ahead.
May I clarify, Mr. McIntyre, on page 2, the applicant seeks to rezone the subject property from RS1 to RT3 triplex and quadruplex residential. So there's no suites in that. If it's going to quadruplex and triplex, is it?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, I didn't hear that.
I think the question was, there was reference to suites, the eligibility of the property for suites. I assume that was under the scenario of this being left as RS1 or perhaps subdivided into 2 single-family homes with suites.
Yes, thank you. That's correct, yes. Under the current RS1 zoning, a secondary suite is permitted, provided to meet certain code requirements.
But under RT3, triplex and quadruplex, there is no suites.
That's correct. It would be the 3 units they're applying for.
Let's get that out real clear, because it didn't come out that way. Thank you.
Yeah. So really, under RS1, perhaps subdivided RS1, we could have 4 units on this site, two basement suites with 2 single-family inside 2 single-family homes. If it were subdividable, is it subdividable?
Through your worship, yes. If the site was rezoned to RT1, it could be subdivided into 2 10-meter wide lots.
Okay, in which case each one of them will be eligible for a suite. We'd have, there would be obviously, under this scenario, it could be all owners owning their own home, but under that scenario, there's definitely 2 rental suites and 2 single-family homes.
That's correct. A single-family dwelling under the 10-meter wide lots would still permit a secondary suite.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else? No. Are there any other speakers to this item? Oops, I know. There's a speakers list. I know. I wouldn't have forgotten. I've just misplaced it. Okay, I did. April. Is April Lucy or Rob? Oh, she mentioned that Rob might be here and said Rob Mead. Name and address for the record, please.
I am Rob Head. Address is 1142 Madore Avenue. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak, and I was really impressed to see several of the councillors out in our neighborhood checking it out and seeing exactly what this is all about. So thank you for taking the time to come out and have a look. Most of the points have already been made, I think, regarding the change to the character of the neighborhood. The one point I want to make is regarding the uniqueness of the streets in our neighborhood. Most of the areas that are on the development plan, except for ours and one other, have 2 accesses to the street, so they have an access at both ends. We have 2 streets with 1 access. So really, if you're looking at it in that sense, if you were to put a multi-development or multi-unit house on a property, you've got 2 ways in and out of the street. In our case, we have a multi-unit development being proposed, and we have 1 way in and 1 way out for 2 different streets. And it makes it a bit unique in the sense of the increase in traffic. So we already have some issues with getting on and off Marmont with the racetrack coming down the hill, and adding traffic onto either house or Madore is just going to increase that and make it worse. The additional point we'd like to make or point out is that on the tail end of house, it doesn't show on the drawing, there's a cul-de-sac at the end of the street, and the traditional learning school is located at the end of the street. That is also between 8:30 and 9:15, and about 2:45 and 3:30, that is a pickup drop-off area for kids in and out of the school. So we have a huge addition to our traffic up and down, especially House, the first part of Madore, coming in and coming down House. And we have a ton of people in and out of the back street during that time. So I think most of the homes in our area have been designated with 2 possible accesses in and out, and on the city map that has the NAR proposals, there's only our street and one other that has the uniqueness of having 2 streets with 1 access point. We've already pointed out the busyness of Marmont, especially in rush hour. It's getting increasingly difficult to turn left off Madore onto Marmont, and the traffic coming up and down the hill is pretty constant. I think the only other point is, I think we're all aware that there's going to be growth in the area. I just think maybe we want to take a look at what types of growth and where, and the situations are all unique. There's no doubt about that, and I would just like to point out that in this case, there is a very uniqueness to adding traffic and adding density onto House and Madore. So thank you very much for your time. I'll keep it brief. Thanks for listening to us.
Thank you. And a question from Councillor Hodge.
No, it's for Rob. Oops. Sorry, good to see you again.
Hi.
Okay, so just a question, because you said we're going to see growth, and this is something we struggle with all over the city. But what would you like to see in this neighborhood? I mean, we're going to start to see growth. Your neighbors are eventually going to sell and move away, and people are going to buy those properties, and they're going to want to do something with them. As Councillor Wilson mentioned to the last speaker, one of the challenges is that somebody can knock down one of those houses, and if they paid $850 for a house, and that basically they paid that for the lot, then they're going to build a house that's worth $1.5 million, which means it's going to have to be big and probably has a basement suite, and it's going to have a peaked roof instead of a flat one. It's going to block the view across the street. And they don't come to us because they can build that within the guidelines. So there's no public hearing, no discussion. Just someday you'll come in and the house will be leveled and the construction trucks will come in. So this is one of the challenges that we face. So I'm just sort of curious, and I appreciate where you're coming from, because I know that neighborhood, and it's a beautiful street, and it hasn't changed yet. But this is the first of what could be many. So I just would like to hear from somebody on the street where you see the street going in 20 years. Where do you see it 20 years from now?
I'd like to not see it turn into a high-density 3-4 different houses on one lot. I'd like to see it remain something that remains with the same character as the neighborhood. And I fully understand that somebody could come in and knock it down and put in a massive house, and if it was changed to RT1 or whatever the other zoning is that's allowable, then that could happen. As it is now at RS1, I believe it is, that wouldn't be allowable. From what I understand, I don't believe you can come in and put suites in. I'm not positive about that. I'm not a city planner.
I think they could build one house. Could they? Maybe that's a good question. I'll just stop for a second and ask Mr. Magna. Under the current zoning, what could be built? If we didn't change anything, what could somebody build on this property or the next door neighbors?
Under the current zoning, a one-family, single-family dwelling can be built with a secondary suite.
So
it
could have a secondary suite, but that would still be a lot less traffic coming in and out of the one choke point.
If they only build one, and of course, other councillors alluded to the fact sometimes we have other issues, but that's outside of the law. But legally, this could be in effect a duplex without the extra parking and everything that's required. I mean, there is some around secondary suites, but that's the challenge that we face all over the city now. And,
Yes.
and I'm not saying I'm not arguing against this. I'm just sort of saying, when you said, you know, the neighborhood is changing, and I'm just sort of looking for what your vision is for it. I mean, most of the homes there are sort of, I think, on one story, certainly on your side of the street, and they're fairly low.
Yes.
But that's not the norm. Whereas we see other streets, and I can name a few, where the same style. On one side of the street, they were 2-story houses. On the view side, they were 1-story, and those 1-stories are coming down and being replaced with 2-story homes. Whether they have suites in them, maybe not. But that's what's starting to happen. And it's a challenge to protect existing neighborhoods from people who move at different times.
Right, and I think that if you have a house and it's torn down and a new place is put up and it's got a suite, then you've added one extra family to the street. So if that's what's going to happen, then that's bearable. But if we start to do that with the next house and the next house and the next house, that choke point getting on and off Madore is going to become unbearable.
And how's the parking right now? Is it still, when I've been there, it's still pretty good?
It's pretty much a one-lane street. So, yeah, parking on both sides. And you're zigzagging out of cars and stopping and starting for someone coming in. I think most of us give people coming in the right-of-way, and the people going out wait. So it's certainly busy at parts of the day, and it's certainly busy on house at parts of the day. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cirillo.
Thank you so much for coming in. Okay, I have a question that might be some math. I might not ask you to do it, maybe staff, but I'm just wondering.
They're the good ones.
I see a whole bunch of names here, and it looks like almost every, if I try to match them with what's happening on Madore and House, almost every home. So I'm just wondering, do you have a sense of what percentage of the neighbors don't want to see a change right now to their neighborhood?
There was 3 that didn't sign. They didn't sign for the reasons that they felt it may increase the property value of their place. So it was about 90%, 95% of the people on the streets, the 2 streets, signed the petition.
Okay, so it seems like over 90%. Okay, thank you so much. And I just had one comment for staff in regards to the report. I just wanted to let staff know that I actually take exception with the strategic goal. This application upholds the corporate objective of strengthening neighborhoods. And I have a big question mark beside that, because when I go to the published strategic measures of success on the city website in regards to strengthening neighborhoods, it says consistently achieve a 95% very good quality of life rating from our citizens. Well, we don't have proof of that, but it also says citizens continue to feel that their quality of life is improving. And I would say, based just on what I've heard tonight and what was supplied to us, that's not the way that this street feels. So I'm just saying that unless we're very much out of touch, that's probably not one of the strategic goals. So just a mention on that.
Our standard report writing template, though, identifies which of the strategic goals this one affects. Not so much that it's moving in one direction or the other.
It says it upholds.
I understand it, and I was explaining that it's simply our standard report writing. This is the clerk's office. Each of the departments writes reports, and it refers simply to the section of our strategic goals. Which of our strategic goals this concept or the topic would uphold. And so I don't know that it's a qualitative judgment as to whether or not. It's staff's judgment, though, that their recommendation is always aimed at upholding the strategic goals, because that's what staff are intending to do.
Well, I would say that there could have fallen in perhaps local prosperity. That's all. I just take the assumption that it maybe doesn't fit.
Okay. It's pretty standard for this kind of report, but we'll perhaps have a look at whether there's another one that's more applicable. Okay. Thank you very much. And now, are there any other speakers to this item? Doesn't have to be, but are there any other speakers to this item? Please step forward, ma'am.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Vivian Dupuy. I live at 1154 Madore. I'm the property right next to the rezoning request. I had several concerns regarding parking. They say that they've got extra parking on the lot. I find that even now, people will be parking in front of my place. I have a ramp in order to get into the house, and people park in front of that as well as close to a fire hydrant. We also have on House, as you've heard, a school where the parents come down Marmont and come into Madore and down House to drop their children off every day and pick them up. So consequently, we have a lot of traffic in that area. Sorry. The design of the property of the house in front, the duplex, does not fit in with the rest of the housing in the area. The only place that has a flat roof, and that is the duplex in behind. The rest of our houses are all uniform and well kept. I've lived there since 1959, so I've seen changes on the street as well. Moving the property line up, I believe 6 meters, or moving it closer to Madore in order to build the duplexes and have enough room for a recreational area. It does not fit into the area of the houses that are there. It would mean that the house is going to be, or the duplexes are going to be built up further, and it doesn't look right. I don't approve of the design of the house, and also the 2,000 or more square foot house that is going to be built on House. The property doesn't, I'm right beside it, so the buildings are going to be right next to my property, and they just don't fit in with the property. I was not consulted or spoken to in regard to this. The only thing that I received was the letter from the council as to that they were going to ask for rezoning. The height of the building, it is 2 stories. I don't know how the 2 stories, whether it will be higher than the house that is on the west side. No, yes, the west side, which is quite a high house, whether it'll be that height or not. But the design of the property, of the house, and the garages and the parking is not what I would call compatible to the rest of the people on Madore. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, just a question for the resident, if I may.
Yes.
And yeah, you have to come back to the mic. So you live next door to this one, and you've outlined some concerns, and we've heard a number of concerns tonight about the design, the look of the building, but we've also heard some general concerns as well. So I'm just curious to know if this were to come up on the other side of you or somewhere else on the street, and maybe it was a different design, it had peaked roofs or something else, would you feel the same? I'm just trying to get a sense of that, is it this particular design, or is it just that you wouldn't want to see this on any of the lots in that block? I'm just sort of trying to get a sense for what the concerns of the neighbors are.
I wouldn't want to see that particular design on any of the lots. It doesn't conform to the rest of the properties there.
Right. But in terms of a duplex, maybe it had a different look. Would you? Is it? I'm just trying to get a sense. Is it this particular look, or is it that we don't want to see duplexes or that kind of density in the neighborhood? I'm just sort of trying to get a feel for whether it's something on this particular one, or if it's just in general what's happening and changing in the neighborhood. You've lived there for a long time, and that's why I chose to ask you, because you've seen a lot of change in your neighborhood.
Yes.
And our neighborhoods are seeing change again. And I'm just sort of wondering, is this about the change in the neighborhood, or is it more specifically to this applicant? Because we could get another one, a year from now for further down. And I'm just sort of wondering what the sense is in the neighborhood.
You're asking about the duplex itself?
Yes.
Or the duplex and
the duplex
house
and the house below. It's three units.
I had understood that the property was to have either a carriage house or a cottage, not a full-blown house. I believe it's going to be 2,000 square feet. That's not acceptable.
So a house with a carriage home, maybe. So I'm just...
The carriage home, I would say, would be okay. But to have another house on one property, one on the front, one on the back, the length of the property, I don't feel is deep enough in order to have two houses or a duplex and a house on it.
Okay, that's interesting, because this neighborhood is unique, because housing, it acts as a street, and there's not many. That's right. There's not many places in Coquitlam where you could actually build one or have dual entrance other than on lanes, and this, it's a unique happened. Maybe they didn't have enough depth to put exact streets, and when they got here they said, well, we'll just do a half a lot instead of having them back to back. So whatever has happened here, it has left us in a situation where we get a lot of different applications over a year, and not many are suited to have a house at the front and a house at the back. Right. So it would not surprise me if down the road, or in the future, that we were to see other types of requests coming forward, making use of that lower street. Yeah. So that's why I asked if it was just a specific one, or if it was about density, or what it was in your neighborhood. So. Well,
my concern basically is parking.
Yeah.
And the congestion on Howes and Madore. My property runs both.
Good. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Okay. Any other?
Yep. Just a second, please. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, thank you. Were you aware that your neighborhood is designated in the official community plan as neighborhood attached residential, which carries the potential for developments like this?
When I first heard of the Austin Heights redevelopment of the neighborhood, I understood that we would be able to put a carriage house on the bottom of the property if the lot was the right size.
Perhaps staff can, do you know when the OCP did change to allow to designate this neighborhood attached residential, and what the exact meaning of that was and is?
Pardon?
I'm asking staff to clarify that, so how long it's been and what it meant when it did come into effect.
Through your worship, this area is in the Austin Heights Neighborhood Plan, which I believe was adopted in 2011 or 2010. 2011? Thank you.
And neighborhood attached residential at that time meant not just carriage houses, but?
Correct. Not just carriage houses. The neighborhood attached residential meant what it means in all areas where this designation is applied. Under the RT3 zoning, it provides the opportunity to put a triplex or a quadruplex on a lot if it meets the appropriate minimum lot area or lot width. The other option is through an RT1 zoning. You can do a carriage house or garden cottage or a secondary suite in the NAR area. So there's several options that you can pursue under this designation.
Does anybody with a long memory in the planning department remember if there was a concern expressed from this neighborhood about the designation in the OCP as neighborhood attached residential? It was before I was on council, or else I'd surely remember.
Through the chair, remembering back to the Austin Heights Neighborhood Plan, my general recollection, there seemed to be more concerns from the neighborhoods to the north and east of the Austin Heights commercial core. To the south, there was a little less concern. I know some that are immediately adjacent to Austin were, there was questions there about the transition, but this area here, people may not have been aware though. It was a pretty broad brush approach taken along that sort of south flank, if you will, on the Austin Heights neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Setbacks. I have a reasonable appreciation now of the proposed setback for this project. But the lady who just spoke talked about fitting in the neighborhood. I'm looking at the map, but I can't tell. Setbacks seem to be consistent across the length of the street. But I don't know what the setbacks are. I don't know what they would have, what the standard would have been at the time these homes were built. And I'm trying to get an idea in my head of just how, assuming that the existing homes are built to the same setback standard that exists today, then this new place is going to be closer to the street at the front end of the block.
Through your worship, yes, the RS1 front yard setback has been at 7.6 meters for quite some time, so I would think you're correct. You safely assume that most of those single-family dwellings along Madore were probably built to that standard, so they're probably at 7.6 meters. The RT3 zoning setbacks, just for council's and the public's information, those RT3 setbacks for front and rear yard were set at the same minimums as the RS1. So the thinking was that going forward, yes, that the RT3 developments would match the RS1 setbacks that have been in existence for quite some time.
And so if this were to go forward and we were to eventually look at the DVP, development variance permit, we'd be deciding whether to allow this house to be 1.2 meters closer to the property line than its neighbors, at least for the foreseeable future. And which is something I'll talk about when we come to debate the merits of the proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge again.
Okay, I'm going to ask this question as somebody, I guess the the statute of limitation on being able to call yourself a new councillor is over, but this is new. I'm in new territory here, and as Councillor Neal alluded to, this neighborhood plan that was done before we were on council. So I'm going to ask a question here, just in general on the zoning. It's currently RS1. It's in the neighborhood plan. It can go to RT3, which is what the applicant is requesting. If in the community plan, okay, so backing that up, if it's RS1 currently, they cannot have a carriage house. Somebody could not, an existing resident, could they put a carriage house in an RS1?
No, they can't.
So they could request to go to RT1, which would allow them to do that. And then, or they could go up to, which the plan calls for is RT3, then they could do, with council's approval, what the applicant is asking for here tonight. The challenge, what I'm finding interesting, is looking at the street addresses and looking at the addresses on the petition. I'm finding a lot of people don't like this proposal. And I haven't talked to everybody, obviously, but those who have said it's not the design of this building or something as much as the fact that, as the previous resident said, I thought that these were going to be houses with carriage houses in the back. Clearly, the OCP is allowing for something, or at least the potential for something greater than what I think the residents in this area had asked for. So I'm struggling with this one because the OCP, which is passed, says this is what you can apply for, but I'm hearing residents saying that's not what they want in this neighborhood. So I'm just sort of wondering from a process standpoint, I mean, I'm just putting that out there and following up with where Council Neal was going with this, is that I'm sort of wrestling with this because I've got a very strong voice suggesting that that maybe this isn't a direction they want their neighborhood to go. I know it's probably not a discussion for tonight, but I'm just sort of curious, what are the options? How do we get to where we are right now?
Through the chair, those are some interesting observations. First, with the neighborhood attached residential area, the housing choices, there's a range of choices, and maybe it's not a one-size-fits-all. It may fall within that land use designation under the official community plan or the neighborhood plan, but the range of choices that are potentially possible aren't palatable in that particular small little neighborhood. The other range, or the other options, such as the duplex, the small lot subdivision that Erica mentioned with a carriage house, those two are permitted under the neighborhood attached residential, but they might be more acceptable or seem to fit better with that particular neighborhood. Under the Austin Heights neighborhood plan, as I mentioned previous, the area sort of south of Austin Heights, across in sort of a broad brush along that whole interface with the Myardville neighborhood plan to the south, was put in this neighborhood attached residential. So there very well may be pockets within that area where you'll get these little sort of micro neighborhoods, and this is kind of an interesting one. It's essentially it's a double cul-de-sac feeding out onto Marmon Street. And in other areas where we've seen the neighborhood attached residential applications, have them come forward in this general area with up to 3 or 4 units, it's seen to be more acceptable to the neighborhood and better works on the properties. In this case, the triplex, quadruplexes encountering some resistance. So I guess I would conclude by saying neighborhood attached residential provides for a range of choices. Maybe not all those choices fit everywhere equally.
In my discussion with the resident, they had mentioned to me that this could set a precedent for the neighborhood, and I said, well, really, that precedent was set when the neighborhood plan was passed, and I mean, I recognize we deal with each one at a time, but the indication was sent out to potential buyers and the residents that this is something that would be could be done here, and so it's not so much this one that concerns me, it's the fact that where this is going and what the residents are feeling, and I think that's possibly a discussion for another time, but it does help me sort of put this one into perspective, so I thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers to this item? Okay.
I can't speak because I'm very nervous. My name is Jackie Michael.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just coming to the microphone, because there's people.
My name is Jackie Michael. I live at 1145 Madore Avenue. I've been there for 41 years, and I'd like just to say our street has a very nice sense of community. Everybody knows everybody. You walk down the street, you greet one another, you know the neighbor's children, you know them by name. Now, I didn't know that they were planning to rezone and build duplexes and everything else. And I'm against it totally, because I thought I'm going off of that street in a body bag. I don't want to be pushed out or be misplaced or we can walk to all the amenities. We don't need all this extra infrastructure. Years ago, when people wanted to build houses and put basement suites in, that was taboo. You know, you couldn't do that. You know, it's not allowed. You're going to use too much water, too much electricity, too much whatever. Anyway, life goes on and there are changes. Now, if this is passed, which I'm totally against, I would rather see a building with a lower structure in front of me, because I'm on the upper side. I can now see the Fraser River, the whole of Surrey. The lights are beautiful at night. I see Mount Baker and the Portman Bridge and stuff. That's going to be all cut off. But I don't want to see one of those monster houses that this gentleman was talking about, where the roofs are so high, and most of them are left empty. My husband and I walk all over Coquitlam. There's houses standing for 2-3 years, billion-dollar homes, they can't sell them. So I would rather see, if it's necessary, which we don't want, most of the neighborhood doesn't, but I do not want a tall structure, and if this one is going to be lower that I can see over, I don't want it at all, but I would rather see it than a monstrous structure with high peaked ceilings and so on. So my opinion is, don't bring it into the neighborhood if it's not necessary. The people don't want it, and what else can I say?
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for the councilors that came out to the street. We appreciate their time. Too bad we didn't get to speak before, and most of us didn't know that this was coming in our area at all. And we just got our letter after the sign went up, which was about a week and a half ago. I could go home on my calendar and get you the date if you like. I write everything down every day.
Okay, just to be clear, we don't guarantee that the letter will get to you before the sign goes up.
Okay.
We do try to get both of them up.
But we were a little annoyed. We tried to amputate the guy's legs at the knee who put up the sign, and he said...
I'm sorry. You said it's a really nice neighborhood and you tried to amputate.
Well, because we didn't want to see change, you see, so he stood back.
We're nice as long as you
Anyway,
sorry,
we did smile and pat him on the back after.
You gave us your address at 1145. Did you give us your name?
It's Jackie Michael or Jacqueline.
You did, I recall.
I'm a homeowner there for 41 years.
Okay.
A great neighborhood.
Thank you. I just want, very quickly, the house that's proposed here is actually shorter than almost anything else that could be built there.
I don't know much about elevations, Mayor, but they're telling me it's going to be up to the top of the furnace stack, which is a bit above the house.
I just that no one builds one story anymore. So my question is to you: is it mostly the height, or is it the architectural design, which I have issues with, or is it the?
It's the extra traffic in the area, the extra neighbor. There have been several accidents on the corner of Madore and Marmont. One gentleman was nearly killed. They drove his car up into the telephone pole on the corner coming up the hill. They had to get Jaws of Life to take him
a
up.
very violent neighborhood.
No, I'm trying to...
You almost killed the poor guy.
Well, if it's necessary to defend somebody, we run around with a bat if necessary to defend the neighborhood.
No.
So we can be violent if we're pushed to it.
Thank you so much for coming.
I appreciate your time.
I appreciate it too. Just
Rule in my favor.
Okay. Or
Do you
what?
have any questions while I'm on a roll here? No?
I know.
Your Worship, I'd like to thank Ms. Michael for letting me know why I was billed double time for the placement of those signs.
Yeah. Don't we have a panic button to call the RCMP when violence? Anyway.
But to save her from checking... to save her from having to check her notes, the signs went up on July 16th, which is...
signs went up July 16th.
Yeah, which is congruent with our standard procedure.
Probably the
back a
same
day or
date
two
that the
before.
mail went out, was it?
The letters generally go about the day before, so there is a cross time, but we try to get the signs up as early as possible in order to allow people to know.
There you go.
Canada Post is less dependent than they used to be.
Okay. I know where this is going, but are there any other speakers to this item? Please step forward, and I'm going to ask the woman in the dark hair next after you. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is April Bussey, and I'm also at 1142 Madore. So my husband made a couple points, but I just wanted to make a couple of additional points. We have looked at this NAR designation, and yes, it has been just sort of a broad sweeping thing. This is the plan to densify the neighborhood. But at looking at this, we would like to, although we've already said it, clearly point out that we are unique and that we are the only neighborhood, if you call it a micro neighborhood, where we have two full streets that dump onto a busy street. So there is one area down here at Godwin and Gerard, and that comes out onto Hart Street, which is not a busy street, so they have a few other places to exit. But we are the only one that has two streets that come out onto Madore. And as you've already heard, Madore is an extremely busy street. It's a hill, so in winter and in wet weather, it's even worse. And the other thing is on House Street here, this is also a hill. So this is where you have the cars coming and going from the school, down and around, then going up the hill and out onto a busy street. So I just wanted to point out that about what we think makes our area unique. So when you're talking about increasing and densifying, our neighborhood does not have the infrastructure in terms of the roads to do it. So I appreciate that this is a broad plan that you've made, but unless you're going to do something about the street there to access onto Marmont, we need to come up with another plan because it's going to be unsafe. That's what I wanted to say about that. The other thing that I wanted to say is you don't show Marmont on that plan, but along Madore and House, there's only intermittent sidewalks, but particularly at the access of Madore onto Marmont, there are no sidewalks on Madore. So we've already talked about the fact that we have parked cars on both sides of the streets. We have cars racing up and down Marmont, trying to get on, it's like Russian roulette, trying to turn onto Madore. Cars parked on both sides and only one lane that you can go through. To top that off, we have no sidewalks. So we have seniors, like some of them who've been here today, who are out walking at least once a day, and students who do walk home from the school, plus our own children, walking on this street, dodging cars with Russian roulette traffic going by. So there is absolutely no infrastructure for this densification on the 1100 block of both Madore and House. So that's my point.
Thank you, and thanks for your well-reasoned statement. And I guess I'm just wondering, when planning was done in this area, and this is for staff, not for you, but do you want to comment? Did we take into account sort of the busyness of a street like Marmont? Did we take into account the fact that we have two streets kind of spilling out onto one, the fact that it was a drop-off area for schools? Do we look at it that closely, street by street, or is it more a broad brush when we do these kind of plans? Because I think they have very valid concerns.
Your Worship, certainly in doing these land use plans for established neighborhoods where you have an existing lot pattern and road layout, you can encounter those sort of challenges, those sort of hiccups. In a greenfield, like a new area, you can plant it, you're working from a clean slate. We do try to take that into account when we look at the land use designations, but there are times where you're dealing with sort of a current condition which might be seen as an interim until certain things are done over time to correct that. With this type of this land use designation, the neighborhood attached residential, in those properties that go through that rezoning process, either rezoning and development permit or rezoning and a subdivision, it's at that time that these frontage improvements are attained. That's part of the requirement of development. So that's how that would be gradually built incrementally over time. The fact that it's just a one access point is the sort of thing I think we'd want to go back and think about that. But again, I'd go back to my earlier comments. There's a range of choices under the housing choices. The triplex and quadruplex, that's sort of the upper end of the range, and that may not be the most appropriate. There might be stuff at more at the lower end that could work in that sort of area, that number of lots, that number of houses on that sort of road pattern.
I mean, when this came to first reading, I went, and drove around the area, looked at the front, the back, and I thought, wow, this is a perfect spot for the housing choices because of the way houses, but I didn't realize that area was used as a drop-off zone for the schools, for the school. I didn't realize that there was so much traffic getting onto Marmont. So, but I guess my concern is we allow this designation, we allow this zoning, we kind of signal to builders that we think it's okay to do this in this area. And then we look at it a little closer, we hear concerns from the neighborhood, and we say, well, maybe this isn't the right spot. And that mixed message just, bothers me.
Your Worship, certainly I can appreciate the seeming predicament this puts us in. These neighborhoods aren't uniform. They're different across. That's what makes up the community. You'll find these pockets, a little bit differences here and there. The land use designation does tend to be, that's why I used the term broad brush before, because sort of a broader area. It's a general vision for that neighborhood. It may not be the exact vision at this point in time. You may need to think about it. It may not be applicable today. But you'll encounter these things where these neighborhoods have some unique characteristics, some unique challenges, some things that need to be dealt with, addressed before the full plan vision can be achieved.
And then my last point, I'll be real quick, is I just think in the future when we do these kinds of OCP changes, new neighborhood plans, I think we have to just really reach out more to the neighborhoods. Everybody I talked to on this street had no idea that this was even being considered back when the consultation was happening, even though we may have sent them a letter, even though we may have put an ad in the paper. People that start busy and they're not paying attention, and I think we really, really need to do everything we can to make sure that people understand how these changes could affect their neighborhoods before the decisions are made. So, okay, thanks.
Thank you. Please step forward.
Thank you. I promised to keep this short. Sorry, I am short.
So far, so good.
I've had the time to listen to everyone, and I've had the opportunity to listen to the other two properties that wanted to have some change. I think what I just want to address to all the council members and the mayor is that I think you've heard from most or a majority of the people who live on that street. Sorry, my name is Cessy Ng, C-E-S-S-Y last name is just NG. And I live at 1131 Madore Avenue. And I really urge you to consider what you've heard from everyone who's taken the time to come out this evening to speak about the development that's being proposed at 1150, because it is a development. It doesn't sound like a family home, and everyone who lives there is a family. And I've been there for 17 years, and I've seen lots of people come and go, and the people who have stayed are families, and they've stayed and chosen to make changes to the current home that they live in, although my parents did tear down the old house and build. So, I really urge the council members to take into account what everyone's taken the time out to come and speak to you about. And I think the person who's bought that property needs to rethink what they plan, because there are lots of families who've been there for a long time, and I plan to be there for a long time. And I certainly do not want to see medium density or high density come into this neighborhood. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers to this item? You don't all have to speak, but anyone that wants to can. Please step forward. And are there any other people who want to speak but decided not to?
My wife wants to know where I am and the battery died, so she can watch me on TV now.
Yeah, please have her dial in. This is webcast right now, so you can prove you're here.
My name is Sarb Singh. I live on 1156 House Place, and I got the letter about 2 weeks ago, and I think the sign came up at the same time. That was the first word that we knew something was gonna, something's happening to our little unique community here, and the developer, the architect, never consulted us at all. I don't remember anyone knocking on our door asking for anything, any opinions on what they think would suit the neighborhood. Looking at the design, it's unique, and it's unique in a sense it's not suitable for the area at all. It shows no taste at all for what a home should be in that area. It definitely, I think the size of it, and I think the traffic that it's going to add. House Place and Madore, there's only one entrance and one exit, and on any given day it's busy. It's dangerous sometimes. We have seniors that live on the street. We have younger people live on the streets, my kids and I. It's dangerous on any given day, and you add more traffic to it, it's just going to get worse. That's, basically 12 months out of the year, but come school time, from September to July, we got the traditional learning school, and even though their official drop-off pickup spot is on Rochester, they don't use that as much. They come onto Marmont and turn onto Madore, come down to House Place, and I've stopped many drivers and told them to slow down because people are walking, kids are walking that are just 2, 3, 4 feet high. I can't see the cars, and it's so dangerous at times. That doesn't even brush on, I know it's not the topic today, but traffic is pretty bad there. Coquitlam is unique as a city, and I think our little cul-de-sac, it's a triple dead-end cul-de-sac ending on Madore, ending on House Place, and then right at the end where it cuts off. But it's a triple dead-end cul-de-sac, and it's very unique. And anything that has to be torn down or rebuilt has to be done with taste and class to preserve what we have there. This, the plan that was shown, I don't think that reflects that. That's about all. I want to keep it short so you can go home, get home, but thanks for the time.
Thank you. Any other speakers to this item? Any other speakers to this item? Third and final time, any other speakers to this item? Any paperwork to hand in? Seeing none, declare this item closed.
Thank you, Your Worship. We're moving on to item 4, which is the last item for this public hearing. It pertains to 2 King Edward Street, otherwise known as Fraser Mills. The intent of Bylaw 4498 is to amend City of Coquitlam zoning Bylaw 3000 in order to revise the distribution of the industrial density permitted on 3 of the lots in the CD1 Comprehensive Development Zone for the Waterfront Village Centre neighbourhood, commonly known as Fraser Mills, located at 2 King Edward Street, as well as to amend the industrial parking standard for some of the lots to make them consistent with the city's parking standard for other industrial zones.
Actually, it sounds like Jay's covered it. The night is still young. The proposed zoning bylaw text amendment would amend the CD1 comprehensive development zone applicable to the Fraser Mills site located south of United Boulevard at 2 King Edward. The text amendments would apply to, need to turn that. Can you help me with rotating? I can't do it on this mouse. Apologies for the technical difficulties. There you go, rotate clockwise. Okay, so these text amendments would apply to the lots that you see there registered as F to the western portion of the site. These are the industrial designated sites under the CD1 zone. Essentially what these amendments would do would redistribute density amongst 3 of the lots 1B, 2, and 7A, which are in the F area, while maintaining the minimum maximum industrial requirements overall for the Fraser Mills development at around 54,534 meters squared. The amendments would also reduce the required parking for the F lots 1B, 2, 3, 5A, 6A at 24 from 1.5 spaces per 100 meters to 1 space per 100 meters. This rate is the current rate applied to all of our industrial zone sites in the city. The amendment would also remove the permitted uses, 3 permitted uses for lots 1B, 2, 3, 5A, 6A, and 24 which pertain or permit retail sale of rental, household business goods, trade schools, and education schools. These specific uses would only be permitted on lots 1A and 7 under Schedule F of the industrial area. And finally, the text amendment would relocate Schedule I, which is, actually, is this? Nope, don't have the Schedule I, my apologies. It's included in your report package. It would relocate the schedule, which is actually, no, it is this. This is the schedule to the CD1 zone right now. It's currently placed in the back end of the zoning bylaw. We're going to put it in its proper location, which is within the CD1 zone. These amendments are being proposed to facilitate the development of the first phases of industrial development at Fraser Mills. The applicant is proposing to construct 2 industrial buildings, one on Lot 1B and the other on Lot 2, which is just south of United Boulevard. Staff are recommending all final readings to zoning text amendment bylaw 4498. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any speakers to this item? Are there any speakers to this item? Third and final time, are there any speakers to this item? Seeing none, I'll declare this item and the public hearing closed. The night is